Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome to the very last Atlantean Autumn episode for the year. I wanted to get this out last month, but the holiday and stuff like that. So, how's it going, Owen?
You should stop spending time with your family and spend it with us. No,
No, I know. What am I going to do?
Of course, I'm completely guilty of doing that myself. So,
Great. I hope you had a good holiday, and everybody else out there had a good one. But if not, good news. There's another one in like 3 weeks, so it's actually a little bit more fun.
I don't know. This is the time that I usually get my son to do stuff. Of course, it's been raining, so that doesn't help. But no, I've like probably everybody else. I spent way too much for Black Friday because
I haven't even really started my shopping yet. Believe it or not, there's a chance Jackie won't be here, so you can.
I'm not talking about for other people. I'm talking about for myself.
Oh, dude, I've people were asking me, what I want for Christmas, and I'm like, I don't know, world peace. I got everything else, There's very few things.
No, you sucked me into the whole, Planet of the Apes because I saw those books. They were so nice. It was like, okay, I can't let these go. I was like, all right.
I don't regret not getting the upper tier where you get the limited edition, blah, blah,
you
blah.
You have the limited edition. You just don't have the white box.
And actually, whatever. The more limited edition.
Yeah. Well,
I'm okay. I'm okay. If I...
Actually, I think the set that you got, which is the same one I bought for this, actually is nicer because I like the color scheme better than white.
It's got that sort of orangutan orange and chimpanzee green.
I know.
The only thing that would have been better is if the slipcase was the black and purple. I guess. I don't know.
I think that green and orange just works better because it feels so reminiscent of Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
So
are you getting any miniatures with it, or the Into the Forbidden Zone box set?
I got the box set and I got the other stuff, and they gave me a $10 discount, so it was $180 or a 10% discount, I think is what it was. So it was $180 for both. That no miniatures, just because I don't really have room for it. I mean, I'm actually trying to get rid of my kettlebells, and it's funny.
Yeah, the miniatures come in really oversized boxes, including the dice tower and the Alpha Omega. But I had to have this one, dice tower. I mean, come on. I mean, this is like literally my favorite part of the movie.
Well, I mean, for you, to me, it should be a must-have, just because it's either that or you have to get the STL files or something for Planet of the Apes. For me, while I enjoyed it, and I remember watching it when I was growing up, and when I say growing up, I mean like 4, but, and I watched all that stuff too when I was in the 70s. But
you could probably pick up the 6 CD set for like $20.
Yeah, but I'll be honest, I really only like the first one. I haven't seen the newer versions. I mean, I saw the one that was the 2002, and I have, and maybe over Christmas when I get which is everyone's like, oh, it's so terrible you're alone for Christmas. Like, it's video game day and watching movies, but I get my son the other one. I'll probably go watch the new stuff that's come out in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of them. I saw the one with Tim Roth as the ape or the gorilla. Which and
that wasn't very good, but that was early 2002.
Yeah, the Wahlberg one. I saw that, and I wanted to see the other ones, but nobody I knew wanted to go see them, and that was at the time where I couldn't eat popcorn, so that was like a biggie. Going to the movie theater and not being able to eat popcorn is like, well, it's like certain things and not having other things with them, So it was just like, and there wasn't really anything else that like reached out and grabbed me by the lapels and said, hey, you're going to the theater to watch this. So
I don't want to, because we're talking about lost civilizations, and of course we're starting off with Planet of the Apes here. I also bought Hyperborea, for there.
I got it. I just bought the player's book, and
it's well, to me it's just another flavor of BX, but I bought the Atlas and everything else for that, and that was 25% off. So I said, okay, because I mean, I like what I've read in it, and
Yeah,
then
I just went through the. Squirrel sent me the Dying Earth from Goodman Games, and I
yes,
just went through that yesterday, and I'll probably do a review on it next year. But I splurged for me, I guess, on the Goodman Games Lankmar. I got like
yeah,
everything
oh yeah,
because
well it's half off.
that's another world that I actually do enjoy the IP. To be fair, I'm getting kind of burnt on Lovecraft. I was a Lovecraft fan before anybody else I knew. For like 10 years, I was the only guy I knew who liked Lovecraft. Even after that, to be honest, no, it was more like from my early teens to after college. I didn't know a single person who had even heard of H.P. Lovecraft. So it was like, enjoying it by myself was fine. Sneaking it into a game and things like that. And then there came this period. I don't know whether it was in the '90s or the early aughts that suddenly everybody was, it was like the same thing with Lord of the Rings. When the Peter Jackson movies came out, everybody thought they were a Tolkien scholar. I'm like, yeah, where were you in the '70s and '80s? Or the
Well,
'90s,
come on. I
right?
was watching Where There's a Whip, There's a Way, and
Mhm.
how can we forget the ranking? As much as we make fun of that, but it's what we had at the time. I think people forget about that because they look back
No, but
with
I
modern
guess it's
eyes,
the hipster or the
looking back.
contrarian in me that as
Yeah,
soon as something gets super popular, I don't care anymore. It's not that I don't like it; I just don't care because I
it,
already went through that, and I can't really vicariously be re-energized. When the thing comes back into popularity or comes into popularity, I'm like, yeah, now everybody, can enter at the ground level and think they know it all, and they're never, most of the people are never going to go and read the books or any of that. They're just going to watch the movie and go, "Oh yeah, it was great. I know everything about it." No, no, you don't.
well,
You don't really care. It was just what was on, kind of thing.
it's the difference between what I consider a
What's
fan.
up, George?
But no, I mean when we're talking about these things, is look, I like Cthulhu, but I did that because of Call of Cthulhu. I kept hearing about it, so then I started
Hmm.
reading the books, and I think that he's a really good writer for description and giving that sense of dread.
Sure.
I liked, just like we talked about with R.E.H. Howard, so when we look at this, and of course, when we're talking about games, and, I like the Modifius Conan 2D20,
Hmm.
um, I think, okay, cool, and it's got Atlantis and Call. I was like, all right, I like that. And then, they
Yeah, but
worked. The only
I
one I
guess
have not,
I
what?
guess for me, it's like that flavor of the month syndrome.
Yeah.
Where I'm watching everybody else finally like the thing that I like, and it just kind of makes it cheap somehow to me. I don't know. Maybe
I'm,
it's just a me thing.
well, for me, I'm going to bring up a little bit different, which is, when you say that I've been burned out, it's like when my son once asked me why I don't like the Beatles. And I said, son, I've been hearing it for 40 plus years. I'm
Yeah,
tired of it. And my mother talks about the same thing. She
yeah.
was the biggest Beatles fan in the 60s,
Hmm.
and she's burned out. And so when it's new and fresh, that's great. I love people that do that. I still have fond memories of
Yeah,
not so much the Beatles, but I have fond
yeah.
memories.
That's a good example.
It,
Because
it's,
I took a history of rock and roll class at in college, and one semester was the Beatles.
yeah.
And I grew up listening to Breakfast with the Beatles on Sunday morning with what's her name on the radio, for decades, and then I got to a certain point where like, yeah, I'd rather listen to Elvis, you know.
Well, then you're going to go through
I
that
did.
phase, and then you're going to get burned out on that one. And I'll
Yeah,
be
that's
honest,
why I've taken things that I like in smaller doses so I don't burn out on them, or I have to go find something new to enjoy. Especially like that's a great example, like with music.
yeah,
The things I liked growing up, most of them I can't really get into them anymore. I don't dislike them, but they're, I mean, you can only hear like, Stairway to Heaven or Back in Black or whatever,
sure.
after like 1,000 times, it's not going to get any better. It's not going to
Well,
change. It's done. It's finite. It's over.
I'm going to
Let's.
mention you're talking. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's, like Lord of the Rings movies. I had them. I watched them. I watched the whole DVDs. I mean, all four things. And
Mhm.
I'll be honest, I haven't. I didn't watch them again until 10 or 15 years later. I went, man, these are so awesome. I wish I'd watched them more often. And then, it gets put back, and then but my son said he loved it. That was great. I feel the same way. I have some of the old Star Wars DVDs.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I had the same thing with Star Wars. Growing up as a kid, I liked it. Then I got to a phase where I couldn't stand it, and then
Yeah.
as soon as I had a kid, I was like, I loved it again. You
Well,
know,
for me, and it's funny because I remember,
not
while
the
I
last
have
three
it.
movies, but you know what I mean.
Well, I know. Well, I'm just talking about the. I don't even like the prequels. For me, it's
Yeah.
100% the originals, 1983. Give me the theatrical versions of all
Hmm.
of the crap. I don't need all of the bonus stuff. I rather just get the theatrical just so I can get that whole
Yeah.
feel, even if it's
Yeah.
somewhat dated. It doesn't. It still feels. But my son
Well, I
watched
mean,
them.
how many people will go back and watch Casablanca? You know,
Oh well. Hey,
right? Thinking it's the greatest movie ever. It's not. It's not the greatest movie ever.
I'll
There's
tell
no
you this
such thing
much.
as the greatest movie ever.
Which one?
Casablanca.
Oh no! Which was the other thing that you said? What did you say was the greatest movie ever?
Casablanca.
No. You said what was the greatest? You put some other movie after.
No,
Oh, okay.
I
Anyway,
said there is no greatest movie ever.
well,
It might not have ever been made. It might not have been made yet. It might never get made. There's no definitive. It's one of those subjective things. You cannot say this is the best. Says who? The entire
well,
world hasn't voted yet, and until they do, and you can get the time machine and vote, from its inception, and ask every single person who lived and died, what was the greatest movie ever? You're never gonna. It doesn't work that way.
well. I mean, my whole point is this much, which is I like different things at different times in my mood,
Yep,
and when you say greatest movie ever, I'm like, look, I can say my favorite movies, but even
exactly.
then, I don't narrow it down to just one. If I had to be stuck with just one movie, I'd be like, it's just like saying,
Yeah,
I'd
you'd
be,
hate it.
yeah.
After a certain amount of time in hell, having to watch your favorite movie over and over and over again, you would hate it, and then it would come on again.
But I like, again, I understand why people raved about Casablanca. I enjoyed it. I also enjoyed The Big Sleep
That's
more.
interesting, George.
No. Well, I knew that he
He
was
says
doing that.
Casablanca inspired the setting for our Star Wars game. I can see that now that you say that.
He
Uh,
says Rick's. I mean, you can't get any more obvious than
well,
that.
no, no, no. Hold on. Every bar I've ever gone to in my entire life, the bartender was always named Rick. That's a
And it's
thing.
probably from Casablanca because they all stole it from there. Um, I mean, but like everything else, once you get the references, you can appreciate what's there.
Yeah.
And I don't, like I said, I enjoyed Star Wars. I enjoyed the originals. I enjoy Spaceballs. I enjoyed a lot of these things. I still, when you go for what are your favorite, sci-fi style movies? Um, I can pick several. Just like I said, I enjoy Planet Apes. I give you hell for it because you're a fanboy of all of them. And I'm like, I'm stopping at the good one.
Like I said, you've heard the story. That's all there was until Star Wars came out. There was no regular other than Star Trek. And Star Trek, as much as I liked it, it was a little too. There was no freedom in it. You know what I mean? Kirk would try to defy orders or whatever, but it was so structured, and my alignment definitely has chaotic in it. So it was just not. I could only get so into it. You know what I mean? And while it was on every Saturday and Sunday on Channel 5, and you could count on it after the first couple of times of seeing them all, you know, other than that, the only other science fiction that you could kind of count on and get behind was Planet of the Apes, and it was huge. It was bigger than Star Trek, to be honest. It made more money. It did more in merchandising than Star Trek ever hoped to, up until a certain point. Then it did a lot more. Uh,
Well, I mean,
you know,
like, I,
the
you
motion
know,
pictures and the TV shows that came after.
but look, when I look back at a lot of this stuff, whether it's 70s or anything else, things that I grew up with that I loved, and I go back and watch it, I have to realize they're a product of their time because they're so campy and bad. I mean,
Well,
that's
I don't know that the first one was campy. I mean,
no. I'm referring to Star Trek and
oh yeah, yeah,
the stuff on the
yeah,
TV show. Look,
yeah,
I loved Buck Rogers at the time. I did.
yeah. But that was
But it's
that came back. That came out after the Planet of the
73.
Apes, after Star
Right.
Trek. It. Yeah,
Well, the early 70s, I'm sorry, the 1970s had these great series coming out. You had Star Trek, Planet of the Apes. You had, I remember the Flash Gordon cartoon. I just had my son watch the Flash Gordon movie. And I said, son, it's still ridiculous. It's fun. And, we grew up on a lot. Well, you probably didn't do as much because I'm a few years younger than you are. But I watched tons of 1980s films at home in the mid to late 80s. And it's like, okay, yeah, the movies bombed on at the box office, but they did really well because they were so cheap and they just ran movie after movie all the time, whether it's Beastmaster or a few of the others.
I wish I would have been able to see Flash Gordon in the theater. That must have been awesome.
I did, but at the time, well, this was I think we were in Germany. We were in Germany. They only put a movie up 1 or 2 nights, and that's it. And you went to go see it then, or it left unless it was really popular.
Yeah, I don't even remember it being in the theaters. But mind you, as soon as like 1984 rolled around, I was never home, never in front of a TV for like 10 years. And the last thing I wanted to do was go to the theater because I was doing other things that were more exciting. And it just.
So Flash Gordon was 1980. And really the music did more for it. I just remember how ridiculous it is. I still have it.
But we just bought it. We bought it for Connell's show, and we watched it, and everybody loved it. Even if the wife couldn't pronounce his name properly.
But like everything else it's just like a book. Certain books are good to reread or revisit, but you don't want too much. It's like music and everything else. And we're talking about stuff. We've done the R.E.H. Howard, so we've listened to all of that. We've done the all the stuff that he did while he was alive that was published when he was alive. Then we've done Call of Cthulhu. I think I've read all of his collected works with H.P. Lovecraft.
I've read everything Lovecraft wrote. Not as much as Tolkien, but I've read every one of his stories minimum of 5 times. All the poems, the whole bit. And I think it's funny, or at least interesting, how like right now we're kind of segueing into lost ancient civilizations that will, if they were or when they are found or discovered, it's a new thing. It's kind of weird. An old thing is a new thing, and then we have like a new thing to obsess over or to study or to deep dive into, if you want. Like Gobekli Tepe and Karen Tepe. They're God knows how old, and if we could get at them and be allowed to admire them and appreciate them, it would be like the next tour of King Tut's artifacts.
Well, I'm going to bring up this much as you have which some will hopefully in the chat remember. There's one in India that's a sunken city that they kept talking about.
Dwarka?
What's that?
Dwarka.
Okay, yeah, I think that's it. They've talked about it. People said, no, that's just mythology. And then they found it and it's there. And then Doggerland for the longest time, and I don't know why. It's funny because the academics are like, unless we proclaim that it's real, it isn't real. Fishermen were pulling up artifacts under Doggerland for hundreds of years.
I just watched this video. I'll see if I can find it in my feed and share it with you, because it was like, I want to say it was like 18 ancient civilizations that nobody talks about. Of course, Atlantis was in there, but the one I'm waiting for is High Brazil. I want to see that one. Explain that one. An island that only shows up one day every like 7 years or something. That is just ripe for borrowing and shoving it into a role playing game. There's this island. It only shows up once every 7 years. But if you can get on it and explore it and raid its temples and treasuries and blah blah blah, you'll be rich beyond your wildest dreams. Let's go. And
if you don't leave in time,
right?
It's good to spare. And I know we talked some about treasure and stuff, but just like in all of the books that we've read, our hero almost comes out with all the gold and then has to leave it behind, either get swept in there and has to rescue the princess or jump out before the island disappears, and all they are left is with memories and a story that no one believes them. And I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that. I really am.
I'm okay with that every once in a while, but if it's going to be every time, that's shitty. You know what I mean?
Well, you should not be doing the same story every time you're playing the game.
Right, right. But
I
like,
mean that's
but I mean, if you, and let's say you're playing a campaign for like 3 years, right?
yeah.
And if you pull that shit more than 3 times,
You shouldn't be.
you're a shitty person.
Well, I mean, you shouldn't be pulling. Well, I'm thinking of, I think they had something similar with Conan. You have to flee the island before this.
Yep.
Which, to be fair, if you're playing D&D with encumbrance rules and not bags of holding, players will drop stuff to run for it, and you're like, okay.
And
And
they
usually,
absolutely should, and occasionally they should have to,
well,
because
yeah,
one of the most exciting things for me in these RPGs isn't the combat, which is awesome, but the running, the fleeing, and the chasing is just as exciting to me. That's why I guess so many games actually have chase and escape mechanics. Where it's a
yes,
it's a completely different thing, because those are exciting. I mean, if you've ever ran, your heart out, for whatever reason, and that feeling of your heart in your chest just trying to escape, I mean, that's an amazing, feeling.
well,
And
and then
to elicit those same feelings and emotions at the table, that's some kind of skill.
then we're going to talk about other sunken places. There's the people of course talk about Bimini Road. They talk about that, but let's look at one that we know is absolutely true that sank under the ocean because of earthquakes, which was Port Royal.
Yep.
Port Royal was considered so, it was a pirate smuggler's haven, and it was known to be so
Yeah.
bad when it sank into the seas. They kind of went, well, this is God's justice for them.
Absolutely. There's even that in a very famous TSR module. I'm not going to say which one, because I'm ripping it off blind for one of my modules. Um, that the same shit happens. The players are faced with this, you know, choice. Not really a choice. You got to flee before all hell breaks loose, or you're rolling up new characters next week.
And sometimes, like, not that we've done it, but not that I want everyone to die, but I think that I was, talking about it. There's nothing wrong with killing characters off, and I know that we've talked about when Bo gets mad. Well, they just brought characters back. I said, characters were so poor that you generally didn't bring back a character back to life unless they were.
Yeah, I was talking about that with
Yeah.
James this afternoon. I don't. The one of the reasons I don't bring back characters, or I loathe to do so, is because,
It cheapens death.
well, not no no. It almost gives them a plot armor that or it seems like, if it was a story, right? If you were
Yeah,
reading the story and the gods bring back this character, right, and then
yeah.
2 chapters later he gets killed, and it's not for like some noble cause, or to fulfill some prophecy. It's just random encounter. Freaking T Rex just steps on him. He fails to save.
Well,
You
for
see what I'm
me,
saying? It would
well,
make no sense that the gods would let him come back to life. Saying, okay, but you got to go on a quest for me and do this thing, and then a bunch of orcs freaking ambush him and he dies.
part of me goes for this is I understand that, but I also understand that if you go by the book, and again, we're not combat was supposed to be fast and deadly. And, this is why, when we joke about things, it's like if you actually look at the hit points, and I know you jack up the hit points in our game, 10 hit die creatures should have 45 hit points on average. Like when you were doing the Beholder.
Wait. What hit die creature?
10 hit die creatures should have 45 hit points on average.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But most people jack up the hit points up to 60 or something. Like, well, I would rather it be fast combat. But again,
Yeah. The main reason I do that is because, let's just say nobody had a dex over 18, right? Let's just assume that for a second. 9 times out of 10, the player characters, if it wasn't the monster surprising the party, the monster would never get an attack. The party would kill it in the first melee round, and there was no challenge.
well,
it didn't even
this
get to
one
make
you're not
it.
supposed to use one. You're supposed to use 5 or 6 or 7 or 8.
Well, not with a beholder.
Well, no, Beholder. Well, even then, and I will admit this much: this is something that fifth edition or the later edition started doing right. The Beholder never started working alone. The Beholder started having minions and stuff like that they used. And to be fair, it has what, an 18 intelligence.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, you were awfully nice to us, because if you actually look at the anti-magic ray, it's a cone of 45 degrees. It would have gotten almost all of us. I mean, a lot
Really?
of. Oh yeah, oh yeah. If you go back and look at the rules, I'm like,
Sorry, Cal, you're the only one.
I mean, when I started looking at that, and again, but I think this is when when we look at different things, which is why I don't like weapon
Well,
specials.
you know why I did that also, because
Yeah,
Cal was right up in its face, like
no,
like
no, I'm not disagreeing with you on it. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm just saying that when you start looking at it, and to be fair, you played
okay,
pretty
there's
much.
one more beholder,
Well, to
maybe.
be fair, you were pretty much playing by the book, and as a kid, I was like, I only has 75 hit points. We can take that down pretty fast. Well, sometimes you can, but one is the beholder. If it can move back, it does that. And then there are things that can be done. That's one of the reasons I do not like weapon specialization and stuff like that, because it puts so much damage on certain things. And I'm not saying that it's bad, but
Yeah, I
those
think it does
yeah,
more than the damage. It gives the damage,
the
it
hit
gives you
to hit.
yeah
The,
the extra chance, the extra swing and chance to hit. I think is more powerful than the plus like 2 points of damage per swing. That's like that's so swingy that on a D8, let's say the average weapon damage, it's like okay, so you give 2 extra points of damage. Well, unless you roll like a 7 or an 8, it could have just been what you rolled anyways.
I know. Well, and then we started finding the rules, because, and I got to thank Bo for this. Was, well, read the rules by Rob. So I read again, like, oh wait a minute, there's the dual weapon wielding. Oh yeah, you have that high dexterity. Why is everyone dual wielding? Because
Yeah,
it's
which is weird because in Dragon Slayer, Bloodworth has got me to play
yeah,
a game of Dragon Slayer, even though Bubba's been asking me to play in his game for like a year. But he plays in the afternoons, I think, or the
yeah.
mornings,
It's just
which you can't
inconvenient.
really
Yeah,
do. Um, the assassin in Dragon Slayer can backstab with 2 weapons,
yep.
but can also attack with 2 weapons. But his main arm, his primary weapon, is -2 to hit, while his secondary arm and weapon is only -1 to hit. Does that
That
sound wrong to you?
it sounds like someone reversed something, in my opinion.
Right.
But
Hey, what's up, Squirrel?
but
Still waiting to talk to you and the missus. Right, because like that would mean like so you get a long sword, short sword, and when you go at somebody, suddenly your long sword is -2 and your dagger is -1.
I would
Wouldn't
just
it be?
switch hands and say, this is my primary hand, this is my secondary hand. I mean,
Oh yeah, but
that's
your primary has to be a long weapon and your
okay.
secondary has to be a short weapon. But it stands to reason, I mean, that your right hand, let's just assume you're right-handed, would be better, and your
Yeah.
left hand is not. Why is it suddenly worse? You'd be better off not using 2 weapons.
All right. I just hit myself in the head with a club. So don't exercise while talking to Shadow. Um,
Guys, you following me? Doesn't that sound completely wrong? Other than
it
the
does.
fact
It
that
does.
other
Sorry.
than the fact that maybe, oh, I was wondering.
No,
Other
no,
than
yeah. No, these are
maybe,
just Indian light clubs, and
uh-huh. The
but
only because I came up with a justification why it might make sense as something along the lines that because you're using 2 weapons, suddenly your primary weapon is not as good. But that would just come with the -1,
I
because it doesn't make any sense really why Gillespie did and reversed that. I just don't get it.
I think that it's a personal opinion. That to me would be a typo, and I'd swap them. And that happens a lot. This is why I know people talk about complaining about the second edition. Usually, the first edition of a game needs a reprint after you've played it long enough,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
even no
with the
matter
white box.
how much you try, unless, to be fair on this, unless you're really just homebrewing your own rules for stuff and then slightly modifying them. But even then, I know like Hyperborea and Axe, which are very, very long development cycles, they still bring out, well, not Hyperborea hasn't so much, but you still bring out another edition to clean up or find all the errors you found when people
Absolutely.
have played
Every game I've
thousands
ever
of
played,
games.
almost every game I've ever played, the second edition was better, almost every time.
Yes. Well, and to be fair, when we say first edition Dungeons and Dragons, that's actually a second edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
Um,
White Box was first, and AD&D
yep,
was second.
exactly. And then technically, the basic set was kind of, that, ignoring all the politics for that, but it's interesting looking at it. And this is why I like buying different games. That set is, um, you know, tailoring into Hyperborea, talking about
Mhm.
the lowest level. That's the one author I don't think we've really read is Clark Ashton Smith.
No, he's
It,
hard. It's everybody. Not everybody. A bunch of people sent me a bunch of audiobooks and stuff, but getting his actual books in hand is not easy. They're not cheap. They're not easy to find. And so for next year when we do the book club, that'll be on the list. But we've got to pick like a starting point or like a really famous story.
well,
And
we're
I
gonna have
don't
to do
know.
stories because the Audible books are like 18 hours each for the 5 volumes.
Right,
And I went,
and nobody wants to sign up for that right now that I know of. Maybe DM James because he's doing that, but ask him in 6 months. Also, watch my video tomorrow morning because uh, the next new shiny is a syndrome I keep seeing, and it's kind of driving me batty because
well,
I'm
I think,
partially susceptible to it.
well, for me, there are certain things that I go for and I look at, but a lot of times I want to look at the PDF first. And then once I get the PDF, then I'll decide if I buy a physical copy. And I, on a Humble Bundle, they had Hyperborea. I've had it there for a couple years.
But
I've
there
been,
are some things sight
yeah.
unseen. Sight unseen. If someone told you they were going to make a X game, your favorite thing, and suddenly the game's out, you're just going to buy it.
Well, to be fair on this, it wasn't until you were talking about that I would not have touched. Because until Star Wars came out, and maybe Merc for that,
Uh,
most games that came out that were based off of IPs sucked. They weren't very good. They were just intended to, kind of as a marketing tool to
yeah,
sell stuff. But
yeah, a cash grab.
it was, well, yeah. But that's what I mean is, hey, we're doing this. We're putting in there. It didn't fit well. It didn't seem to work with the original source material. But more and more of them have been getting really good for their game of actually matching the feeling with the game. Like, Alien, I would have never bought if I hadn't seen the PDFs first. And now I look at it, I wish I could run it, and we will. I mean, I need to sit down over the weekend and learn Foundry well enough, and then set up the server so we can go play that next year. But but the Alien one I really like. I like their panic mechanics, which I wish more games had some of. I mean, Call of Cthulhu has some of it, but I like that. I like the different aspects to it. I said, this is fun. And then you have 2 different versions, and some it's like, hey, tone down the lethality. You have what they call their cinematic version, and then you have the regular. And talking about Lost Civilizations,
Mm-hmm.
show me just about any IP or anything else. I don't care if it's from, what's his name? Ray Bradbury. When he did his Mars stuff. It's always been there, and I think when we talk about Donnelly, who popularized Atlantis, he was looking for it. But like you said, I think all too often people were projecting what they wanted Atlantis to be, whether it's
Oh,
Tarzan,
absolutely. And
rather
it
than
wasn't just that. It was any, El Dorado, the one of the absolute most obvious, wishful thinkings of all time. A city of gold,
well,
a
let's
place that
let,
literally anybody who heard of it would be considered a fool not to go look for it if they knew where it was.
well, I'm going to bring up a little bit different, which is while we talk about the city of El Dorado, there was literally a mountain of silver that the Incas owned, a literal mountain, and that's how much they mined out of it. Um,
And one of the next mountains over would have been the Mountain of Gold, and
no. I'm talking no. We're talking about a mountain much further away from where they said El Dorado. But some of the problem I think whenever we talk about these lost civilizations, is you have the conquistadors coming in, and whether it's DeSoto looking for the Fountain of Youth or these others, they tortured the representative saying, "Where's the gold?" And if you're being tortured and you're like, "Well, the more gold I tell them, the more that they'll leave me alone." Yeah, there's a full city of gold, and the other part is the Mayans when they came into there, they did have tons of gold and they did appreciate that.
yeah, where was there was that place where that king literally covered himself in powdered gold every day.
That was I think that was Montezuma. There were things like that, and people, but they didn't hold it the same way we the West did in certain cases. The other part is just talking about lost civilizations, and I'm kind of shocked. There was a huge copper civilization in the Americas, like 7 or 8 thousand years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they just for whatever reason it just stopped. It's probably that they mined out all the easy to mine copper, but it just stopped. And yeah, there's always stories of what's over the next hill, and it's the same way if you've ever listened to the hobos talk about, you know, the what is it, the Candy Mountain.
Well,
Um,
it's been a while since I rode the rails, but yeah.
well, there was a song that they used to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and um, it was like, oh, okay, but it's always a dream of, hey, when it's over here, it's just like they said, United States roads are paved with gold. The United States is, that's what they would tell people. But the real reason
There are
people
no
say it
cats
is,
in America.
yeah, well, but people are projecting what they feel that they want. Talking about some of the games, one of the games I read, which was kind of cool, was a fifth edition Cthulhu-esque one,
Mm.
except it had some really weird stuff out there. It was called Eldritch Century, and part of it is that they talk about Atlantis and all these others. But like I said, when I was growing up as a kid, I forgot what the guy's name was. I was reading about Mu. I read about more about Mu than Atlantis, but Mu referenced Atlantis, and then people referenced Lemuria, and it's like it. When people say continent, we're saying, well, our island. Well, how big? Because it's not that hard to get an island, the size of Madagascar. If things don't turn out right to go underneath,
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I wish I had both the money and the time. Was Randall Carlson went over to the Azure Islands, and they were talking about some of the megaliths there. Um, we have all sorts of stories about this, even stuff that we know about. What is it, the Minoan civilization, where they talk about
Well, like
the
I mentioned earlier,
yep,
Gobekli Tepe and
yep,
Karen Tepe. What the hell? Those places don't even seem. Those don't make any sense. You know what I mean?
yeah. They seem, what is it? It's not anachronistic. It's there's another term for it where they're completely out of place for their time, and
It would
and that's
not just that, but it's very hard for us to discern a reasonably acceptable purpose for the place.
I'm going to tell
Other
this
than some
much.
sort of the ubiquitous. Oh, it's for religious ceremony. Oh, really? What ceremony?
I'm,
That you're using the easiest or the hardest to disprove argument or explanation for what it was. I mean, it could have literally been a place to race animals. We don't know. You know what I
well,
mean?
here's what gets me is we know that there are generally one last thing getting on to George. You can play Bill Paxton, but you're playing Bill Paxton is like in the Terminator where he got his heart ripped out. You're not playing aliens. You're playing Alien. But no, but no. If you look at it, it's like okay, they built this, but what everyone seems to ignore is they're digging up artifacts away from Göbekli Tepe that are they have full statues and things like I think it's called the Man of Ur, and you look at that and like okay, from my perspective, that is thousands of years out of place of where it should be. If someone said, hey, this was built 4,000 years ago, I'd say okay, but when you look up and they say, well, we believe it's 12,000 years ago, you're like something isn't adding up here. At some point,
Well, yeah,
civilization reached.
the whole timeline of humanity, according to the academics, is retarded. It
Well,
makes no sense that
well,
we came out of nowhere and suddenly we
I'm going to be a little
building
bit different, which is it's more of the idea that it's completely linear, ignoring the fact that we have times in history where civilization went backwards, even when it was continuous. That there's this idea that we are continuously moving forward, and I still hear that. When I was listening to Legion of Myth with with Heathen Dog, and he's like, no, we always go forward. I'm like, we've lost technology. We've lost technologies that we had 200 years ago, and they say it only takes 2 generations to lose the knowledge. And people forget about that. We know that like the Burkle crater, which is a really cool one. Like at some point, not that anyone wants to do this, I would love to do kind of a paleo stuff and then have some Atlantis. And you don't know what time
Is
frame
that
you
why
are.
nobody can program a VCR?
Or you mean set the time on their microwave? I used to set it, and then my parents had to learn to unset it when I left the house because I had it set to certain times to record everything. But no, it was, but if you're going to do the Younger Dryas and stuff, it's like, oh, okay, we can play at a certain technological level. Or we can do, when we see technology, not everything has to be swords. You can have magic, and you have things like that. But boy, if I hit you with the, with the Missoula floods, guess what? If a Missoula flood hit us right now, I'm not sure what we would do. Or what is the other one? The super volcano that went off. We're not even talking things that completely end the earth. We're just talking about a major disruption in modern society. And we all saw during COVID, boy, one event can just cripple the entire supply chain around.
That show, Dark Angel, did a really good job, I thought.
Yeah, it did some of it. But those are all the
With
things I think.
the power grid goes down, and suddenly we're back in the Wild West.
Oh yeah. Well, people forget about that. It's like, okay, if we have one EMP, which was Dark Angel did, and it takes out our electricity, we're immediately thrust back to the 1800s. And it's like, okay, now what? And don't get me wrong, I can do some canning, but most of my stuff still requires energy and stuff like that. I don't have all the cast iron pots and all the other things. I have stainless steel pots. I'm not saying you can't cook in them, but it's not the same. You all of a sudden you have to go back and you're doing what your great grandparents did, and how fast would we lose knowledge? It would just be like that, especially if you're living in a big city and the supply chain breaks at that point. And while everyone talks, to be fair, everyone talks as if it's going to be Lord of the Flies. Apparently, it's not. It's not Lord of the Flies. Every natural disaster I've been in, you get the 2% that are roaming around, and then that's when you get people on top of roofs with guns shooting looters. But every time I've ever been in one, Millie, it's been a few weeks, at worst. But the neighbors come out, they check on you, they look at you because, and no one wants to. Even when I took an emergency management class, the first responder are not police, they're not firemen, it's your neighbor. Your true first responder is your neighbor. They're the ones that are going to be pulling you out of stuff. And even when we look at natural disasters in the third world, they don't immediately. While you do get a few of the people, most people are not going Lord of the Flies. People want to believe that. It's not true when we look at reality.
Well, I think it depends on the country too.
It depends on your leader and who's there, and you get a warlord. I'm not saying you don't get warlords, but to have everyone act like Lord of the Flies is not true. You get warlords here and there. Don't get me wrong, but this is why it's nice to have a good, strong community. But that's not Lord of the Flies.
Essential, right? No, it's usually. I mean, to get a Lord of the Flies situation, you'd literally.
Well, even Katrina. As much as people talk about Katrina, the stories that came out of Katrina in most cases weren't even true. They were just hearing rumors, they spread them. And I'm not saying that people don't loot. That's a different thing. But I'll be honest.
No, but you'd really literally need to have like a desert island to get a Lord of the Flies.
Well, you know what they found out was there were a group of kids where they got shipwrecked for a year, and it wasn't Lord of the Flies. They all worked together, and they, it was more like Robinson Crusoe. You get 2% of psychopaths. I'm not saying that you don't, but you have to get people to support them and everything else. But I think that's the problem is everyone wants to look at the 2% and believe that's all of 99% of humanity. Like, No, it's the 2% that ruins it for the rest of us 98%. That's why you have to kick out psychopaths. You have to identify them and nullify them. And it doesn't work in small communities because a psychopath, you can screw someone over once or twice, and then you're out of the community, and that's death.
But again, it also depends on the country. I mean, if you're talking certain third world countries and something really bad happens, there's 0% chance they're going to band together.
No, I'm going to say, okay, name one, because I've been into a few of them. Let's go. Afghanistan, that wasn't true. Everyone looks at the warlords, but when I talk to the Afghans most of the time, it wasn't quite the same for them. Even in Africa, as much as people talk about, usually what it is you get one ethnic group against another ethnic group, and that's a different aspect. But it's not that all of a sudden you start screwing over your own group, because in long term, that's kind of killing yourself. But ethnic divisions and things, well, that happens all over. I mean, that happened in Europe and everywhere else. But that's not a Lord of the Flies incident. And I think that's the problem that people look at.
I guess you'd also have to kind of define what you mean by Lord of the Flies, where they resort to cannibalism, or they just resort to shitty behavior.
Well, but what do they say even with chimpanzees? Which, don't get me wrong, chimpanzees murder each other far more than we do. But it's even then, they said that the most successful leaders of bands are spending more time trying to diffuse situations than they are fighting. Because even if you're bigger than everybody else, you get two people, you get two chimpanzees, and they'll rip apart the stronger chimpanzee. It's like, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
it is a numbers game, and no one guy can hold on to power like that physically, like Conan or Kull or something like that. And Howdy Grumpy.
And even Conan, as much as we talk about that, Conan was always like the leader of men. He banded, it wasn't just, unless it was a one-on-one combat, it was, we'll get the the crew together, which was what I think happened.
Right. Well, no, I meant like literally, like, because Conan only becomes king at the very end, and we never really find out what happens after that one story, or maybe two stories. Whereas Kull starts out as a king, and the entire rest of his life he's fighting to stay king.
Yeah, but no, I'm talking about what was it, Hour of the Dragon, or which is Conan the Conqueror, whichever that was. Like when he gets put in slavery, he still rallies the crew around him to overthrow a bad leader. And that you see that throughout, the stories for that. So it's like, oh, okay. And Kind of Pirates did that too. That's yeah. And that's a perfect example, Grumpy. I mean, like I said, I've been around, where we had hurricanes and we got hit, and your neighbors aren't the ones screwing you over. It's the people coming from the outside that come in to loot. And that's when the neighbors tend to band together. And, we're talking about Hurricane Andrew. That's where they suddenly put people on the roof, and they're like, looters will be shot. and if they don't know you, that's where we get into a clannishness aspect, but not Lord of the Flies. And I think that's the problem. Is people confuse clannishness with Lord of the Flies. You want to be in that in group, but you don't want to be the other ones. But yeah, it's. But I'm trying to think of we need at some point we do need to figure out which stories are good for Hyperborea, because I was listening to some of Clark Ashton Smith, and I just wasn't getting the Hyperborea stories. Like, okay, which ones are Hyperborea? I
don't know. I've never read or heard a single Clark Ashton Smith story. They're on my list of things to do. Yeah. But you literally probably have to go, and I hate to say it, go to Wikipedia and do the dive into his bibliography, what stories he wrote, in what order, and what those stories were about to get that.
Because Coco B, are you talking about? Sorry, I'm sorry. It's just like Haiti earthquakes in 2010. Well, go look at those roving bands, and those were the same roving bands that were there before, and then they just made it worse. It's not, but that's not a Lord of the Flies instance. It's, like I said, is you get a strong. This is why it's important to build a strong community. when you know everyone, you have the in group and out group. And like I said, whenever we
Well,
had
and
our
again, I think
yeah,
I'm going from memory. The worst thing about the Lord of the Flies was that they were going to eat the kid, right?
I don't remember. I've never read Lord of the Flies. I've read
Okay, I'm
synopsises
pretty
and stuff,
sure
so it's been a
that's
while.
literally, um, they the Marines or whoever the Army shows up just as they were about ready to like eat the kid,
And
like one of their
very
own,
yeah, yeah, but very
and
rarely. Like I said, there
and
was
that
that group.
in modern history, I don't think that's happened except in the most extreme situations. The Andes Mountains kind of thing, or something like that, and that wasn't because of or the Donner Party. That wasn't like a wide scale. People are eating each other.
It
Uh,
was a survival cannibalism, and in most cases, the
that's
sad
what it
part
is.
is that you ate your family member because that was your family, and it was. It's really interesting, when you start looking at it. It's not that they go around like, "Ooh, boy, you look like." Don't get me wrong, that did happen in Russia whenever they escaped
Yeah,
gulags and stuff. But again, when you get a band of criminals coming in, which are not part of your in group, that's going to happen. Or you put people together who aren't, that. But usually, like I said, is here. Even when we were out of power, people were offering me food. People were offering to
yeah.
help me
I
out.
literally
Yeah,
can't. I mean, I can for game and science fiction fantasy purposes, but I really can't picture a situation where people have to or even think to resort to something that desperate.
yeah,
It was funny because when you think about the Andes Mountains, the Alive movie
yep.
and Donner Party, both instances, those people were trapped by freaking snow. That's why I say F
Well,
snow. Snow's bad. Snow's
yeah,
evil.
yeah.
I want no part of snow because it turns people into cannibals. Um,
Well, but the funny part is, if you actually start looking at it, and they did this actually in the was it Jamestown, which I thought was so funny. For the longest time, people like, no, those are just allegorical stories. Even though the people there were writing that they were eating human beings, it's usually when someone died. If they were in true starvation mode, it's when someone died of natural causes. Then they would butcher them and cook them. But they didn't go out and usually kill someone. Most cannibalism is either survival, like in that case, and they wait till someone dies and then they eat them, or
uh,
it's ritualized, which is, hey, we're going to eat our enemies and we're going to sow terror. So that gives you your New Guinea cannibals and your like Charles Taylor over in Africa, where they would go around and like, hey, we'll just terrorize everybody and we'll eat them and cut off their arms and stuff. And that's it's meant to incite fear. Um, so those are your two versions. But yeah,
yeah, the fear that I'd have to eat that crap.
well,
There's
I
got to be
mean,
something better.
well, here's the sad thing. If you were trapped in the mountains with your wife and son, and you're like, look, if I die, eat my body. It's like, that's fine. It's, you have to survive. That's that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that we're in that position in the first place where there's no hope and that you have to resort to cannibalism to survive. And that's usually what happened a lot of times. It was like, I think even that happened in Alive where if it was your family member, you got to eat them, because it's like, I know it sounds really morbid and despicable, but that's
Yeah,
because
it's disgusting, and I mean, because I remember watching that movie, and I'm like, I'm stuck on a mountain, it's covered in snow, and they were what they didn't want to go down the mountain. I'd be like grabbing a piece of the plane, turning it into a toboggan, and I'd be the first one down within like 8 hours.
well, you say that, but I mean the reality of it is when you start looking at stuff, it's like, um, when you start getting into these things and you have to go up and down hills, it's just like, if you look at Shackleton, which was a true, you know, if we're going to talk about Atlantis, let's talk about Antarctica too. But Shackleton, his people were caught in areas nearly starving, and most of them would rather lose 50 to 100 pounds before they even looked at or thought about cannibalism. And by then they were so weak, it was only if you died on your own, because you still have society. It's only
Yeah,
when you get the Jeffrey Dahmers and stuff. But let's be honest, those are psychopaths. That's your
yeah,
2%. So it's, but But Shackleton, he literally like sailed 8,000 miles, went up, landed on an island, climbed 10,000 feet, went like 20 miles across a mountain range to get help. And they couldn't do it. Most modern, like they did it. I think someone finally completed it, but they used like special forces soldiers trying to match it, and they still couldn't do it. I mean, yeah. Well, there you go. Shackleton's crew all survived. Um, but talking about Atlantis and all of the other things in there, what was the Minoan island, which exploded from a volcano?
Mhm.
I mean, those are. It doesn't matter if you're doing a game; they're all great, and you can always say. When we always say advanced civilization, to me, advanced civilization means that it's more advanced than what you have currently. Or actually, I don't even do that. I say
Well,
advanced
it's
is
funny because in the actual case of Atlantis, what Atlantis had was a superior moral compass, and that was it.
I think
And
that they
even
also
then,
had. I think they had superior engineering. When you
no,
start looking at.
no,
No, no,
no,
I
no,
mean
no, no. That's the funny thing. That's what I was. Well, if they did, it was in creating buildings,
that's what
and
I'm referring to is
they
harbors and
didn't
things like
have
that.
superior weapons. They didn't have
No,
superior modes of transportation because they were still using the same exact kind of ships. 9,000 years later, they were using the exact same good boats, right? The height of their weaponry was the sling and the spear.
I'm gonna. Well, don't. Well, we also talked about this. Don't ever knock the sling, but if you look at it, if you look at the Romans, while we talk about their military technology was not that much superior to the rest of the world in most
Right.
cases.
No,
It
no.
was,
All Atlantis had, because Atlantis was being used as an argument to adopt Plato's idealistic idea of how society should be run in a moral sort of socialist manner. Uh, and he
but
was
see, I
using
disagree with
Atlantis.
you on that. I'll take Plato at face value, but even with Plato at face value, is again we're talking about Romans and things. Show me where the Romans were that much superior technologically, um, in military technology. We're talking other than in
Well, the
most of the
Greeks
stuff.
beat them. The Greeks beat Atlantis, and we know
Okay,
what the Greek
you're missing my
technology.
point here. Is technology doesn't the Roman superiority was in engineering in their civil works
Sure.
versus the Celts, but the Celts had similar technology, similar weapons. They did not have the tactics, which was the difference, and they had a different social structure. But the the Greeks. But that's what I'm saying. When you look at Atlantis, Atlantis had those harbors and things like that, which to
Hmm.
me says they had superior engineering, but that doesn't mean that they had superior, um, like high technology. Like we said,
No, no, they
it,
did. They had.
yeah.
They barely had the wheel.
Well, even for the United States, let's assume something.
Mhm.
The United States still had to pull out of Afghanistan at a certain point because it couldn't maintain it. And
Yeah,
if you don't have the ability to,
Vietnam. You know, uh,
well, I'm just saying that
with all
Atlantis.
our technology, we still couldn't beat them. You know.
Well, I mean, with Atlantis, go look at the distance. That's thousands of miles, and then you have to keep up the logistics of sending your troops over there. So, of course, you could naturally beat them given enough time, unless they had a massive invasion force. Um, but most of them, you don't get that. You don't get the massive armies in certain cases, and even the Persians did not. There's a people forget logistics is how you win wars. And so, the Greeks could have gone there. The Atlanteans could have been of equal numbers. They could have had somewhat superior. But if you can't pacify the population there, and then
Well, you got.
if you can't supply, if you can't supply your army's going to lose. That's just what's going to happen. Um,
Here's the thing: this was fake. Plato was using it as using this fable to try and convince the people of his society that Plato was correct in adopting and pretending to adopt a non-existent culture's uh, ideas, claiming they were his, not his own, in trying to convince his people to do things his way. And in doing so, he created this place that outnumbered the Athenians like crazy numbers to one when they fought Athens in the before times, but Athens beat them back, defeated them because they were more spiritually still in.
You must be reading a different thing than I did, and we read the exact same thing because it didn't say that. He said that your people beat them back, but again,
Mhm.
what does that mean? That I mean, if you look at that as the Vikings came over to the Americas and were beaten back too, um, how much were
Yeah,
you?
because eventually it's going to boil down to either numbers or defensive position, right?
Well, it's going to come down to logistics. If you can't supply your army has to pull up and leave. Um, and
Yeah,
again,
but they were defeated before they had to leave.
well, my point being is that if you don't have logistics, they're going to beat you, and then you have to leave. Um, that's what happened with Rommel over in North Africa. Logistics wins wars, and people forget about that. It's the same reason like the Germans were superior to the Russians, and the Russians crushed them because of logistics.
Mhm.
Um, well, also population numbers, but logistics wins wars. And look at where Atlantis was. Look where Greece is. Tell me
Uh,
how long it takes you to get a ship from point A to point B. I
I
it's
honestly don't know the
it,
speeds of ships
no
back
no.
then.
Well,
To
I'm not talking about speeds, but if you look at the distances, it probably took a couple of months to go back and forth. And if you aren't being supplied regularly, or here's an easy way: you get one bad storm, and all of a sudden your ships are not being resupplied.
sure, sure,
You're done. I mean,
yeah.
and that's
Again,
what
I don't think it was. I don't think it was real, so it never happened.
we
Therefore,
well, we don't know. We do know that there are ancient civilizations that go back that far,
right, right.
but and the point being is that at no point did he say that they were of a much higher technology in there. It was
No, no. It was
so
all about Atlantis fell because the original descendant of Poseidon and the human that Poseidon married, that family lineage kept diluting its blood through marrying of more humans because there was no other gods to, you know, his Poseidon's wife's children. From that point on, his children married humans, so the god bloodline was diluted, and those children married humans. Therefore, the bloodline was diluted again and again, and each time that was diluted, also the moral superiority, the righteous goodness was also being diluted, and they became more interested in monetary possessions instead of doing goodness, doing good deeds,
well,
and
I mean,
and that's what
let's
literally uh, why they
well,
fell.
you're assuming that Plato was making stuff up. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But if you take it at face
Well, I know he
value,
was because Poseidon never existed,
well, for them, all gods existed at that time.
but they were wrong.
And well, we don't know if Poseidon was just a regular man because people do all sorts of stuff. But
George, that's weird.
Hey,
that's the whole point of
Welcome to
whenever
the
we're
show, George.
discussing this is you're trying to take everything literally. Well, we'll just assume that there was a place out there. And
Well,
again,
I
the
have to
Minoans.
because literal is the only argument against the crazy claims that have come about Atlantis since then.
Well,
Everything is
let's
it's a
remember
game of
this is
telephone.
this is the same time as the Iliad,
Mhm,
and which now people are saying yes, there was a Troy.
mhm,
Yes, they do have this. It's the same thing with the Bible.
mhm.
People start invoking gods no matter where they are on their
Yep.
success or failure, and then whether you look at it, which again, when we're talking about all this about the Great Flood myths, in almost all cases, and we do look for rationality in irrational things. We have a tendency as human beings to do that, which is, why did, what happened with Noah? The earth was wicked, and this was a way of cleansing it. And they have done that in multiple stories throughout the world. And I think it's a way of learning how to do it. And I'll tell you this much: I was just through a major thunderstorm coming home, and I can see why people were like,
Oh yeah,
"Yes,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
good."
They
Yeah,
were
I
they
mean,
were they were I mean uh, functionally retarded for most of humans' history.
well, I'm not.
yeah.
No, I'm
Oh,
going to be a little bit different. Which is, they weren't functionally retarded. They were functional, but they were using myth to explain the things that they could not. That's not functionally retarded, because let's be honest, if you put me up against Uzi the Iceman, who's gonna survive out in the wild? He's more functional than I am, but you know,
I don't know. It depends on whether or not I can kill him or not.
well, you're still probably going to starve to death. But I mean, from
But I'm going to
my
live longer,
perspective,
therefore
well,
winning the argument.
we just live longer because we live in a softer world. But it's but that's the whole thing of yeah, exactly, the divine store. But those are what I'm referring to is, you know, does it really matter whether we say that? It's just like people that complain about if the Earth is flat. Unless you are doing surveying and stuff like this, it
Yes,
doesn't matter whether the Earth is round or flat to you. You know, that's what always gets me about this. Is that's why I said there's being functional and then being quote educate. Only certain things
you
only
have no
matter.
sense of humor, Owen. What were you saying, George?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just kind of I wanted to point out. You know, we were talking about Plato earlier and sort of Athens was now one Plato is writing at a time like Athens is been defeated. They are at a low point. And we could actually, like you were saying earlier about logistics and stuff, which is totally true. That's how Athens defeated a major power, like, you know, and it's kind of another, you know, it's almost a metaphor for a metaphor. You know, so they defeated the Persians by defeating their logistics. They defeated their fleet, which they didn't necessarily need the war. After the Battle of Salamis, the war continued on for a little bit, but it was like basically the Xerxes or whoever it was, he's
Learned
like,
his lesson.
it's over, it's done, the war is over. He went back home. This huge army just kind of rampaged through Greece for a little bit until like it just sputtered out at Plataea. So and like one of those things about the whole context of the time is he's talking in a time where like Athens is literally at a very low point. They were just defeated by the Spartans, and he's kind of writing about these things about Atlantis and how, like, they can still defeat that great power, and it's like in their blood, in their history, in their people.
Well, what amazes me in that is, we talk about how people generally didn't travel that far, but you look at the ancient world and how much they did move and travel and talk to each other.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. It's ridiculous to think that they didn't, when they have so many similarities that would not occur simultaneously, or even not so simultaneously, but still look and act and sound the same.
Well, but I mean, let's look at this depending on whichever time. Doggerland. Doggerland was taken and sunk into the sea. The Minoan culture sank into the sea. Anything around the Burkle crater, which would be around India, that would have sunk in the sea. To say it's in there, but then you start saying, and this is where we start putting meaning on things, is if something suddenly comes from the sky and destroys something, you're usually going to say that's divine retribution. And then you start saying, you tend to find meaning after the fact, not before, for a cause. So if you suddenly say a comet hits the Earth, you're going to say, we must have been wicked. There's a great flood. We must have been wicked. What can we change about ourselves? And that's a lot of, I think, when we talk about reflection, that happens a lot. It's just like, when they talk about survivor's guilt, and whatever people are doing, they suddenly feel guilty for being alive and saying, okay, why were we punished this way? And that's not unusual. We tend to do that regardless. And that's why I said, and when I said, when I look at, when we're talking about Atlantis, and we're talking about RPGs, it's like, look, if we're going to go for the exact story, the Atlanteans were not, while the Atlanteans were what I want to call an advanced civilization only from the fact that they had, I want to say, they had technology or cities that were ahead of their time. Now, again,
I don't even know that to be true, because the architecture that you're talking about was literally supposedly created by Poseidon himself, not hundreds of, not thousands of men working under someone's directives. Poseidon created the island in the shape that it was in.
Well, but my point is that
Men didn't do that, according to
some people dig stuff out and then they'll attribute it to whatever. That's what I'm saying is when I'm, again, my whole point of this when I say advanced civilization is it's a time that is ahead of what the generally accepted timeline is. That to me is what an advanced civilization is. So if all of a sudden you start getting steel if you get steel 1,000 years before everyone else, that's an advanced civilization, even
Right,
though it'd be way beyond us or
Yeah,
way below
but
us.
I literally
and it
saw
may
it.
be like not necessarily the things that we think of as like the sort of milestones, because
Yeah.
like there are some advanced civilizations out there that didn't quite get like things like steel and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, we've got
Um,
we've got what is it? That giant freaking rock that men moved. Baalbek, I think it is.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Well,
giant
they talked
freaking
about that.
slab of rock that it's like, it's like a skyscraper on its side, but men lifted it up like 8 feet and moved it to the right or whatever. Uh, where it came from.
Well, the
Years ago.
obelisks,
Yeah,
a lot of this stuff. I'm not saying that people didn't have it, but my whole point being is that,
yeah.
when I hear people say, well, we couldn't do that now, I'm going, we could, we just choose not to. Is
Yeah.
what
Well,
I
we
think
don't know
is
how they
different.
did it. They did.
It's almost like a magic trick where like
Yeah.
we spend like we see the video and like, oh yeah, and you spend like 2 minutes thinking how they would do it,
Mhm.
but like they spent days and days thinking about it. The way like a
If
magician,
not decades.
they spent weeks developing their magic trick. Well, we just sit there and ponder it for about a minute, and then
Well,
we can't do it.
well, I'm going to bring this up
Mhm.
too, which is a lot of times we do things that are from an economic standpoint. Does this make economic sense? And whereas you go back then and people,
They don't have those concerns because the economy was whatever the ruler said it was.
well,
Right.
I also want to mention this
I
much,
mean,
which is
I'm simplifying it, but in a lot of those cases, if the king said you're doing something, you're just going to find a way to do it. It doesn't matter about the actual cost. The cost
well,
is in human lives, and those are dime a dozen.
well, we say these things, but also forget that massive civic projects, which you knew were going to outlive whatever leader was there. We're not talking like minor stuff. It's like getting a whole country to war. If you can get them behind a massive civil project, then they'll do that. And guess what? The way they're looking at it is, this isn't just for me; it's for my future generations. It's not just for the king; it's for all of quote.
See,
society.
I always looked at it as a matter of force. When you're at the top, you're the king, the emperor, whatever, and you tell your men with spears and swords to tell people with whips to make the people do stuff. The people just didn't revolt. They didn't
Uh,
have the wherewithal or whatever to revolt and say no. They would
well,
just be put
people.
to death, and then the next guy would be like, "I guess I'm going to do what you said because I don't want to be put to death like that guy."
Well,
Yeah, but
but
Fear.
there was change
and
though. There was like if you like follow like Greek history, there was like these periods of different changes, and they actually were pretty modern in like their understanding of history. Like Thucydides had like a very modern understanding of it, and like it wasn't just all like the previous guy like Herodotus, where he's just like kind of picking up stories and putting them together. So like one of the things is like in the ancient times, like in the early archaic period, like just after the Bronze Age, or you can think of the Bronze Age as similar, where they had kings, and then there was this later periods where they had the kings didn't quite work out, I guess for whatever reason, and then there's a period of what they call the tyrants. They're kind of like dictators, but then like in some, they kind of kept this king as like a ceremonial role, where it was like they would bring him out on feast days and stuff like that, and then some of the city states would develop a form of democracy in some way or another. Even Sparta had a form
the
of
other part
democracy.
is you still have to inspire the people to go do it. And there's we're trying to look at things in modern eyes. Back then is, guess what? If you helped build this, you were looking at eternal life, and suffering was minimal.
Yeah, I can't buy into that sort of altruistic motivation by the people. I
You
see
can't
them
believe
doing
it,
it
but I'm
out of
saying
fear.
historically, that's what happened a lot of times.
I don't believe it.
They
You may
also
not believe it, but historically, I mean, we can go look at a lot of the writings.
Well, of course they're going to write that down. Yeah, the people all agreed to not. I forced every one of those fuckers to do what I said.
yeah.
Again, but you're missing the whole point, which is a lot of it was when you still have to do it, you still have to inspire people. And if you look at, especially like when you look at the Celtics and stuff, if the king had bad times, you know what they did to the king, right? They hung him and they got a new king. I mean, this was not something new. Again, you're trying to look at things at modern eyes, which is we don't have.
No, I'm going by human nature.
I'm going by human nature too.
Believe it.
Human nature is when you start looking at people. Go look at some of the like perfect examples. Go look at the Crazy Horse thing. How long has that guy been working on that? His family's been working on it. It works on generations. And I'll tell you this much: those cathedrals that people built, it was over hundreds of years for cathedrals. Cathedrals took like 200 to 300 years to build, and they're again, it's not just by force, it's also by
well, there's other, there's guilt, there's coercion.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be at the point of a weapon.
Well, that's my point.
They had lots of different ways of like sort of relief valves, like colonization, like all these, like if you look at the map, like they go to Italy, they go all over the place, and all these cities that get developed later on are kind of like they would have like an ancestor city, and often like they would be like 3 generations away from a previous city settlement. Like for example, there were some cities that were like colonies of Corinth, and then that colony got big, and it's usually when it gets too big, it's not because like the land wasn't enough. There was sort of like these internal pressures of like people just being discontent. There weren't enough jobs to do. There weren't enough government kind of things to do, like positions and things like that. And so then they would just send out some of the young to make a colony, usually one of like the princes or something like that. And then like it was quite fascinating. Like, there was like these, they would just get in a boat, find a new place, and.
But I'm saying that you inspire people to do stuff, and they get behind a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe that, especially if you're a big believer in the afterlife, then it's much easier. Again, that's why I use cathedrals, we have a lot of written stuff about that was fairly mundane. And you look at it, and okay, fine.
And I file that under coercion.
Well, coercion is that they're being forced. We're not talking to people being forced in this case. Most of them were paid, and they did a lot of stuff. It was, again, it's much easier to tell someone you're going to get eternal life for doing this, and they do it.
That's coercion. That's a form of coercion.
No, coercion is where I'm doing it by force. That's not coercion. That is persuasion. Persuasion is different. Coercion is the threat of force. Persuasion is to encourage someone to do something, and they do it of their own free will. Those are two very different things. I'm not saying that coercion isn't used sometimes, but a lot of times, whenever it came to temples, I mean, they built the temples because they're not thinking in short term. That's the problem that we think about a lot of times. Well, how's this going to do it? It's the same thing of whether you read the Bible or anything else. Why do you're planting olive trees, not for yourself, not for your children. You're planting them for your grandchildren who you will never see. And that's the kind of things that they're thinking about. I'm building this temple. I'm building these things for my future generations. And that's the way they were looking at it. I mean, and again, this is something that modern Europeans have lost. But when you start talking like Afghans and people like that, they hold grudges for hundreds of years. They hold, and you have to realize when they tell these stories, they tell the stories like this happened yesterday. There was someone that was talking about Genghis Khan. We want to talk about something about that. The Afghans were treating that like that happened like right before I was born. I mean, that's how close they were viewing stuff. And this is why I'm not saying that there weren't slaves. Absolutely, there were slaves. Greece had 1/3 of the population were slaves, I believe. That was pretty normal. But slavery was also in a different. You had different versions of slaves. You had the convicted slaves, which they basically worked to death, and then you had the well-educated slaves, which were basically servants. They were servants, and if you threw them out, they would probably starve to death. So it's like, but the problem is that people don't talk about this stuff. They think it's all just one thing. But yeah, you still had it, but you still have to get people and laborers and things like that, because otherwise you have a lot of unrest. But if you again, the worst example you can get of probably slave labor, which intentionally was meant to kill people, is going to be the Great Wall of China. But even the Great Wall of China took generations. I mean, that was what I think they've said it's now like 12,000 miles long. I mean, that was a massive. That's why when I hear people talk about well, we can't build a border on the south of the United States. I'm like, they explain why China did it. The Hadrian's Wall, which was, I think, was what, a few hundred, was what, 90 miles or something across there.
Yeah.
You know, people's, it's just like going to war. People still go to war, you know, if you can get the patriotism and everything else, they'll be like, yeah, I'm going to go out. And if you make them feel like it's a good cause, and that's why you start appealing to, you know, gods and things like this. And it's very easy. Like I said, for the during the Middle Ages, how long did it take to build a lot of these structures? The guy who started it never even saw it completed. He didn't even see, like, what was the Tower of Pisa, was what, 200 years? He saw it only went up like 3 stories when the first guy was alive.
One thing, like the Spartans, like they didn't really build much, and you didn't see, like, you don't see or what, there wasn't much written enough behind, but it was a lot of it was like poetry and songs that got them going. You know, got them to be these big warrior caste in their world.
And what's your culture? Your culture starts saying, if you do this to the gods, you know, you can get a lot of people together to do things that, you know, they don't. You know, when we talk about
that's still a form of coercion.
No, that's persuasion, because
because you're using threats. Threats are part of coercion. You don't have to actually do the thing. You can threaten. You know, you're going to burn in hell because you don't do this. That's a threat implying violence, but not actually using violence.
Well, yeah, but what's your reward? What's your reward? Tell me on all the gold that you have in the world that could compare to eternal life and eternity.
And that's still
that's not coercion. That's not persuasion.
No, because you're threatening. You're telling them, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. That's a threat.
No, if you're telling me that, hey, if I do this, I'm going to get a reward, that is persuasion.
It's a carrot or a stick. You know, it's literally, you know, it's both, I guess.
It could be,
you know, because it's not being done by the person actually saying the thing. It could be like propaganda, it could be lies, but it's not necessarily threats. Because I think, like, because it's,
well, I mean,
for example, if you
say if you do this, you go to heaven. Okay, that's persuasion,
right?
But that same, you can't have that without the opposite or the other end, which is, if you don't, you go and burn in hell.
Let's say that. Let's say there's an honor code.
The other side of the coin.
Let's say there's like an honor code, and kind of people generally follow it and agree to it, and it has, like, you know, it's like, oh, you being like using a bow and arrow, you're like just being a jerk about, you know, you're like the equivalent of like an assassin in a battle. It's like dishonorable. And is that coercion if everyone just looks at you negatively because you use bow and arrow? Like, you know, like, it's like, you know,
it's not really the same thing, because like what Owen and I were talking about, you know, he's saying that they would persuade them by saying, you know, if you do this, you will go to heaven.
Yeah.
And if I don't,
then you're stuck in the same place you would have been normally.
The same way.
I mean, you're stuck. If you look at a lot of them, it was very, how do I put this? Like, if the Romans' afterlife and stuff like this, very rarely did you actually see the positive, unless you were doing some great deed. It's the same thing that the Norse did. You get to go to Valhalla, where you get to fight every day and drink, and it's like, yeah, but what happens if you aren't that great guy? Well, then you're just like every other person out there. And again, there is a superiority thing, and I said there's a moral persuasion in this. There is a societal pressure to do these things, and you go through.
But there's also an implied threat.
That's not necessarily, well, if you're going to be part of a society, you know what the real threat is that you get kicked out of society and you wander the desert for 40 plus years. I mean,
sure.
I mean,
and then you die, and then you go to hell.
Well, you die and nothing happens. You don't go to heaven or hell. You just you die. You know what their biggest fear was dying unknown. That was their biggest fear. That you would die unknown. I mean, that's why they would get up in front of battle, and then if you look at the Romans in certain cases, the first man onto the battlements was usually presented with, even though it was mostly posthumously, was presented with some type of award, which meant that his family became citizens after that point forward.
If they survived.
No, even if they died. That was one of the reasons if you want to be the first one.
No, I meant you said the battlements. Well, what's behind the battlements is the rest of society, and if the rest of society survived, then cool. But if they didn't, then
Well,
they got
I'm
nothing.
talking about with the Romans, where they would storm a city. That's how, and you're talking what, a few thousand soldiers, and one soldier in that, if he was the first one willing to go across it, his family from then forward became citizens of Rome. And for him, he's like, that is worth my life. I mean, that's a reward. And those are things that you do to motivate people. And I'm not saying that you, and you can always motivate people. Like if you're a slave and say, look, if you do this, I will free you after so many years. The people like, hey, and then a lot of slaves were paid, oddly enough. You got a stipend when you left. It's the same thing that happened with gladiators. If you fight well, you can earn enough money to earn your freedom.
Yep.
There are rewards incentivizing people to do things. So not everything is just at the sword. I mean, you have a lot of
No, they had spears and they had whips and they had cages and lions.
When there's a whip, where there's a whip, there's a way. But I'm saying you can't just do things by pure force. Otherwise, you end up with King John over in England, where basically even his nobles rebelled against him, and he was forced to sign the Magna Carta. You have those, and all it takes is someone that's discontented and to get the masses together. I mean, look at what happened with the Mayans. A lot of them said Montezuma knew that he was near the end and things were coming in, and he was definitely afraid. And all of a sudden, when the white Spaniards came in on their mountains, on their floating mountains, which were ships. And that's the thing, is we tend to project on things that we know and understand. And at the time, they watched the stars far more than we did. They knew a lot of things about when.
Well, they could see them better than we can.
Well, that's true, but they also went outside at night, which is a big difference too.
Sometimes they didn't have a choice. Everything was outside.
Well,
for them.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that because I in doing research on Atlantis, it seems that the more humanity advanced technologically, so did Atlantis.
Yeah. Well,
you know what I mean? The fiction behind what they could do in the beginning was nothing. They couldn't do anything technologically any better than anybody else in the world, literally. Okay, and then you fast forward to Madame Blavatsky and the Thule Society and those people, and suddenly, because their understanding of technology had advanced by thousands of years, so did what Atlantis could do. So Atlantis could suddenly do all these crazy sci-fi things that, as far as we know, no one's ever been able to do ever.
Well, and
you know what I mean?
Well, again, that's what we were talking about. Ignatius Donnelly, if you look at where Atlantis really started blowing up, was he wrote his books, they became real popular, and then people ran with them from that point forward.
Right,
and that was
because
1870s.
Until we get to Stargate Atlantis or any of this other nonsense that just literally but
it's so fun.
Really,
the whole point of
exactly. I'm trying to actually get to the fun part is how where would you draw a limit, like because like Gamma World is kind of like the world that was is kind of Atlantis. You know what I mean? And now you're living in the ruins of the after effects and all the cool things that you find are like from Atlantis. They're from the before times, but it's kind of like that. You know what I mean?
Well, that's because Georgia sank underwater, and Atlanta they had to learn how to swim. Didn't you see Futurama and all that? No,
I knew where you're going. Right. It's like even now, like if you look at the first edition of Gamma World, right?
Yeah.
What was sci-fi in that version is almost primitive compared to the advanced ideas of the last edition of Gamma World. What was sci-fi in the last edition of Gamma World makes the stuff in the first edition of Gamma World look like the Jetsons compared to modern sci-fi.
Yes, I mean, like I've bought a few of them for there with the, like you talk about Gamer World. I haven't bought anything about Gamer World, and I look over at it and I guess I could go to drive through, but I went for Mutant Crawl Classics.
Same thing. What was whatever, because like back in the 70s,
Yeah.
Nanotechnology, nobody even knew what those words were. Okay, right? You had flying cars, but now we've got VTOLs and teleportation and things like that. They didn't have some of those concepts in Gamma World, but now in Mutant Crawl Classics, or even like what was that one of the more recent Star Treks where they didn't need ships anymore because their transporters could transport you from freaking planet to planet or star to star, and things like that, because our understanding of science and you know on the side science fiction has expanded as we've learned and mastered science more, so our science fiction is more fantastical now than it was 50 years ago.
Well, and I think part of it is that if we didn't do that, it wouldn't sound as interesting. Again, like you talked about, is I'm okay starting at a certain time period of my 1980s, and you know, about every civilization has great cataclysms, great things that go back. What always amazed me, again, is people saying that somehow we don't lose technologies or we don't go backwards. And did you not know of the Dark Ages? They literally call it the Dark Ages because technology in the world went down from what it was under the Romans. I always find that funny for certain things, and then we know that certain societies they come up, they do really well, and then there's either massive famines or climate change or whatever. We see this in the Southwest of the United States, where you see these flourishing cultures and then they just die out, and it's like, okay, there's some type of climate change during that time. Even people forget about Greenland, and then the other part is, and I think this is a little bit, is you had the little ice age. People talked about things. The ice advances, literally buries things under glaciers and stuff, and then when it melts, they come back and go like, oh my God, there was a village here. And I think sometimes as a society we sometimes forget about things, but they make wonderful stories. Shangri-La, areas that are unexplored. To me, that's the big thing for Atlantis. I think Atlantis, how do I want to put this, in a sci-fi realm doesn't work quite as well. Yeah, exactly. The civilizations before the Bronze Age collapse. Well, I think that all civilizations romanticize what happened before. Even we do this now when we talk about, man, it was so great in the 1970s. And you're like, no, it wasn't. If you go back and look at
the 80s were the 80s were the last great human civilization, and we're gonna have to go a long way before we can do anything that's that cool.
Well, we say these things, but then you look at it like, okay, every generation said that. Like, there's youngsters. You remember when you were a kid and you heard the old guys.
Dude, everybody knows the 90s sucked.
I don't know. I thought the 90s were
everybody,
awesome.
Everybody.
I thought the 90s were awesome. Everyone else, you guys talk about that anytime. Like, I got the internet. I can do this. That's when we start getting Warcraft and Starcraft and all these cool games. And yeah, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. But everyone romanticized it. Do you remember growing up as a kid and they had Happy Days for the 1950s and they romanticized that? And I was like, the 1950s, why am I romanticizing that? I always looked forward. To me, I just thought it was funny. I was always looking that things would be better in the future. And instead of looking back at the past and going, oh, it was so wonderful.
Yeah, but you live in the free state of Texas. I live in California. Well, so in California, it's only going to get worse until it gets really, really bad and then stops. And then they bulldoze it all over and into the ocean and start from scratch.
Well, California is just Atlantis, waiting to happen. You get one big earthquake, it shakes it off.
Maybe.
Come on. We all know that at a certain point, it's going to split at the San Andreas Fault. It's going to have the...
I'm right on the San Andreas Fault. I'm literally... My property is on the San Andreas Fault, so I'm kind of fucked.
I want to mention this much. I don't think Plato romanticized as much as people think.
Probably.
Well, no, I mean, reading it, I don't get the feeling that he romanticized a lot of it. It was like here's another land over here.
No, he
We have
all out of whole cloth, as far as I can tell.
yeah.
There's no indicators that anything he said was even remotely true.
Well, that's not my point. My
Even
point
his
is
own
I don't think he romanticized Atlantis like people think he did. Not when I.
No,
Yeah.
he just I think he literally just made up his story to try and convince people of here's this thing that happened that didn't happen. I'm going to use it to convince you to do things my way so we can emulate that. And people took it for either believed it or not and moved on. Even his own students said he made it up.
I don't remember
So
his own students saying he made it up. They just said he was quoting Solon, which we've lost whatever.
no. I think it was Socrates was his student. Said he believes he just made it up.
I kept saying it was Solon, which was a famous Greek. And the problem is
No,
that
no,
we've lost so
right.
much
But
that we don't know.
yeah, Solon was like an amalgamation of a couple of people.
Solon was like, if I remember correctly, Solon was almost 100 years before Plato.
Yeah,
it was
he was like a lawgiver or something.
Someone he could have never met.
Well, and then you get stuff from there, and again, the problem is we don't have very much written. We're trying to
Right,
most
and,
of
and
our
he never
texts are
finished.
gone.
And the worst part is he never finished the third book of the trilogy.
Well,
So for that alone, I hate him.
wait a minute. Did he not finish it, or did we just
George
never
R. R.
find
Martin of the ancient times?
No, there was a third book and he never finished it.
I heard like
He never even started it.
I also
Plato's
heard
not your bitch.
well, no, I remember. Well, you know what? That's still better than George R. R. Martin. Anyway, but no, but even though all the works that we have from the Romans only takes up like a bookshelf. I mean, it just amazes me on how little we have of a lot of things. Now, a lot of things we've inherited as far as like laws and stuff, but we have to go back to see how far they are. But the actual original texts are not that often.
The amount of literature is really minuscule.
And things were copied, and then, like we said, Library of Alexandria was burned. And apparently, people knew about Antarctica, which is the weirdest thing. So, I'm not saying, again, when we talk about it, it appears there's some megaliths over in the Azure Islands. Even what Plato describes for Atlantis, and you and I read it, it doesn't sound like it's romanticized as much as people want to put it out there. It sounds like
yeah. Well, I think everybody who came after him, wanted to read more into it, and that's the huge problem, because you get people looking for it like they're literally going to find the cure to cancer, when all they're going to find is another sunken city, another ancient civilization that will make some people's lives interesting, but will not put us into outer space, or like I said, cure cancer, or anything super meaningful on a global scale.
And it wasn't any more advanced than what Plato's time was anyway. So even if you want to go advanced, when he was talking about things, it was like, okay. And even if, like I said, even we take things on face value, it doesn't really change anything. Like you can play about the gods.
Well,
all
stories that's
had
the
gods.
Fun. That's like the fun part of all exploration into ancient civilizations, is that we're going to find something that's going to change the world. Like in some magical way. We just discover cold fusion, or some crazy technology, which is like all of if you look at like the Disney's Atlantis, the Stargate Atlantis, Stargate, all those kind of, even Battlestar Galactica, or the ancient alien theories. All of those people want to attribute advances, scientific advances from the past, that we have no evidence of whatsoever. That we have fallen so far from heights we have yet to achieve, and to me that's actually kind of fun. It's kind of sad and depressing, but it's kind of fun to think of, in fiction and whatnot, that you could find something that would like be a clue to how far we can advance.
I'm gonna
Sure, like you take these crystals and suddenly you have cold fusion, and now we can do it too, and with that we can do even more stuff.
Well, I'm gonna bring up certain things which they're still trying to figure out, and this is why I like having it at the lowest level, is well, how did they get certain things? Like, if you look at the Mayan, not the Mayan, but some of the stuff in, I forgot what the city is. It starts with an S, down in the Andes, where they, the rocks are super close together. And I've heard certain things, but
Not Shabalba, that's an X.
Like the ones like you can like get there's like no joints, like you can't even get like a piece of paper in there or something.
well, there's
Yeah,
joints. They're joints, but you can't get anything in between them.
Yeah.
you can't get a piece of paper. They basically found a way to uh, like they started with clay and just took chunks of clay and just mushed them together, or softened the rock so that they would fit so tight together, which it could have been just done chemically.
Well, that's
They could have
what
used,
that's what they've been talking about, but it wasn't clay. It was like actually basalt
no,
rock.
no. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
Cement?
No, it wasn't
some
cement.
sort of mortar.
What I've heard is that they talked about acid, and what it would do is that they would pour the acid, and then and how they could shape them, and then they could fit it very easily together that way. And actually, and it wasn't regular acid; it was hydrofluoric acid, which is super nasty. and
Right, which means how did they even handle it? Because they didn't have glass,
um,
and glass is like one of the only things that will keep you from,
but hydrofluoric
burning
acid
your
doesn't
hands
work on
off.
glass. You have to use like a ceramic. There's like certain things you have to do with it.
Right,
But
you know what I mean. Though there has to be some way to manipulate it without your fingers. Otherwise, everybody would be unable to do anything because they had no hands.
well, but I mean, but that's one of those things that they talk about. But then they found that there were certain plants that create hydrofluoric acid, and then they can distill it to make it stronger. And hydrofluoric acid is one of the few things that can break down like pieces of granite for quartz, because quartz, that doesn't get affected by almost any other type of acid, but hydrofluoric acid will melt quartz. Anyway, the point being is that while we're attributing everything to high technologies, a lot of times stuff is done at low technologies, and people just don't know how to do it anymore. It's the same thing of like, have you ever guys watched the guy who does like woodworking for Korea and Japan, and how they do joints?
You have to be more specific.
Well, and they do joints for the woodworking for their buildings, and
Okay.
they don't use any nails. Everything is jointed together, and the joints all fit together. It's almost like you can snap them together like you would like Lincoln logs almost, but they're even more. But it's a really complicated way of doing that, and if you don't have master woodworkers, most people would never even think of doing that the way that they're doing it. And it takes hundreds of years, and things get passed down. But again, 2 generations, boom, it's lost.
Yeah, but things like that, in a fictional story, they really don't grab the reader.
No.
Like,
What I'm trying to say is that we're just saying that certain technologies that can still be done today, people don't know how to do it.
you really need something that's a kind of a spectacle, something that's that will awe people to make it worthy of the story.
Well,
You know what I mean?
Well, here's the sad thing. I don't know if you realize that. Other than a couple of our tall buildings, go look at the buildings of antiquity and see just how much more grand they are than anything we have built in probably the last 150 years.
Oh well, no, I'm totally aware of that.
150,
But
maybe.
you find you're for example like let's go like a sci-fi way, because that way it's easier. You land on a planet and there's this ancient civilization that died off 1 billion years ago, and all you find are a bunch of buildings.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. But you come to another planet that's got an ancient civilization that's billions of years old, and there's things floating. There's globes of energy just sitting there, being suspended by force fields. You got to have some sort of crazy spectacle, a showy kind of sci-fi techno magic to like sell the story.
Well, no.
You know what I mean?
Well, no. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the whole point of it is that, yeah, I agree with you. So if you're going to do an RPG, you always want to make it more grand. But most people have never been to the pyramids. Most people have never been to the Parthenon. Most people have never been to cathedrals. There's Grumpy. What I'm saying is they weren't clay. Clay was maybe what they held some of the acid with. But go look at like a lot of these things that are out there, and you realize that these were buildings that didn't take 5 or 10 years. They took 100 years. And this way, I think sometimes it's easier in a fantasy world to do this than a sci-fi world, because sci-fi you have to make things more advanced than they are currently. For a sci-fi,
yes, and you have to and you have to come up with some sort of techno babble to make it make sense as to why it's doing what it's doing.
So like if we did a D&D game, and then we set it, if you're in the D&D level basically, and then I set it up into like a modern day where you have the giant buildings and stuff like this. Anyone that's ever played like Horizon Zero Dawn and stuff like that, where you're climbing up skyscrapers, and it has that whole that's what. But whenever you have that looks so wonderful and fantastic. But back then, let's be honest, a lot of the Middle Ages, they looked at the stuff the Romans did, and they're like, oh my God, how could they build anything like this? What do we have?
They had help from space aliens.
Well, what is it? It's not the Parthenon. What's the? And I've actually been to the building, which is the main temple in Rome that's been there for 2,000 plus years. Which one?
Pantheon.
Yeah, the Pantheon.
Hey, nerdy, what's up?
That's mind blowing to a group that was back then. And I think the problem is that unless you've grown up in a really small town and never gone to a big city, you're just like, so what? It's not that tall. It's not that big. It's like, okay, it's only like 100 or 200 feet tall.
Howdy.
Ignoring the fact that it took, how long did those castles take to build? I was like at Castle Egger, and they kept building onto it for like hundreds of years. It's and you look at it, and you go inside, and you're like, this is nice, but it's not as big as I thought it would be. I think that's part of what comes into it is the world has become so much smaller that we just aren't as impressed as what we used to be. And
I'm not impressed by anything. What are you talking about?
And then you have to make stuff that's more and more grand. And of course, it becomes more and more outlandish because you want people to buy into like how fantastic this is.
Well, yeah, you kind of have to, because the common lout out there, is seeing big fancy buildings their whole life on TV. You got to show them something that defies logic, or at least conventional understanding of what's feasible. You have to give them some freaking magic.
Well, I'm gonna bring this up. It's not having been to New York. The first time I went to Chicago, I freaked out because the buildings were too tall. It felt claustrophobic. And
yeah, I know what you mean. The first time I went to LA as a kid, and I looked up and I went, "Oh my God, this is crazy! Why aren't they crashing down on me?" Sure, but after a while, most of us humans have been, have become,
conditioned,
desensitized to some of those marvels. You need to have something that's, that's, for lack of a better word, magical, to really, drive home the fact that it was, some sort of advanced civilization.
Right. But I'm saying,
because like the people who are making up the stories about Atlantis, they had those cathedrals and they saw them on a regular basis. You know what I mean?
Most of them did not. I mean, they might have seen them once.
Madame Blavatsky, I'm 100% certain she had seen all kinds of impressive architecture.
Yeah.
Growing
up. In the 1800s, they built some incredible, really cool, beautiful stuff.
Well, yes,
like after modernism. Like if you ever look at I was saying the other day, I was looking at like something for like to use for like an RPG or something, and I found like the 3D scan of the Paris Opera House.
Yeah,
and it's incredible. It'd be great for a vampire game or something.
Well, yeah, but what I mean is that most of the writers, let's take R.E.H. Howard. He probably never went. He never went to Europe. He never saw a lot of the things they talked about. You saw it in the book. most people, like myself, I've never been to New York City, but I've been to some other cities. But that's what I mean by this is, unless you lived in that major city, you didn't see it. And even then,
Mhm.
how often, again, most people haven't gone to Greece, they haven't gone to Italy, they haven't gone to Germany and seen these things. Most people, what they think are castles, and the problem that we also have is that we project what we see now versus what they had. Like, people ignore the great scraping of the 1800s, um, which I find funny because, we see all this marble and stuff and it's all clean. That's not the way it was in antiquity. Everything was painted.
Yeah.
Everything was painted in the Middle Ages. So all of these, concrete buildings that we see from that time, that used to all be painted. And then
Yeah.
during the 1800s, they came in and they scraped all the paint off all these buildings because that was the aesthetic of the time. and, and yet, if we saw, of course, we think now it's completely gaudy. Anyone that's seen the land wreck and how they dress,
Or Egypt, how it
yeah,
used to be painted,
Mhm.
yeah,
with all those bright blues and
yeah.
turquoise and shit.
Yeah.
Well,
Like you could see it in like the Minoan stuff. That they kind of preserved that
Someone fucking
those like
do.
burgundy columns,
You're
painted
fucking the
columns
wrong
and
thing.
stuff.
and they're gorgeous when you look at it if they
Yeah.
can keep them maintained. Um,
J-
what, but I hate saying this is like they talk about how tall some of these statues were, and they're like they were 50 feet tall, and I went,
Did you guys ever hear the whole Tartaria thing? Or like, oh,
Yeah, yeah, that nonsense. Absolutely.
it kind of feels like
The
kind of
World Trade, the World's Fair,
yeah, like
and all
they
that.
dig up
Yeah,
like
you
old,
just
yeah, like they show these old buildings and stuff from like the 1800s, and like yeah, they say it's like Tartaria.
oh yeah, I but you know what? It's still fun. I really don't care about that. It's
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah. That's supposed
oh
to be
sorry,
the point of the discussion. Nerdy, you're awfully
yeah.
quiet.
Oh well, no. See, my take has always has been, um, if you go back a couple thousand years, all right, a person didn't generally go that far from his home village, like 20 miles max,
It
and
was
that
either for war or a pilgrimage. That's the only time you left that far. Yeah,
Or if
right,
you're like a merchant or something or a
yeah.
sailor.
right, and so if you think about, it's like if you take that person and he goes on, he takes that pilgrimage, or is forced into war or whatever, and he sees this big
Anytime,
city.
Grumpy. Well,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Next year we'll do it again.
Oh,
Take
sorry,
care,
sorry,
man.
sorry, nerdy. But yeah, we're just inviting Grumpy.
He sees this big huge city that maybe like 10 years, 10, 15 years, more advanced in technology. So then when he goes back to his little village, he tells everybody about it. Oh, and they had all these great huge technological marvels. And so everybody's talking about that. Well, in 10, 15 years, when that little village is caught up to where that big city was, um, what's going to happen is that the people that hear about this big city with all these, they're not thinking 10, 15 years advanced from 10, 15 years ago. They're thinking 10, 15 years advanced now.
Oh yeah.
Okay?
Mhm.
So if that city was to ever be sacked or whatever, maybe he went off to war and they attacked the city, and that's how his all the technology was spread out throughout the land or whatever. That knowledge was spread out. So
Yeah.
then that's my thing. It's like we think of, well, Atlantis was an advanced civilization. Well, if you go back, a
Yeah.
couple thousand years ago, advanced then isn't advanced now.
Well, here's the
But
other
we're
part
thinking
too.
of advanced civilization, so we're thinking advanced from our perspective. So
Yeah.
we're
Like
Well,
thinking, flying cars and floating
yeah.
citadels and all this other stuff, and stuff that looks like magic to us.
I'm going to bring
You
up one other point that you brought up, which is, and people forget, back then a lot of the cities weren't more than about 10,000 people. And if
yeah.
you went to some place like Rome, which had 1 million, I mean, that's like, I think England at the time of, what was it, around, was it 16, 1700, like 20 or 30,000 people. And then you go to some place like Rome that had 1 million during its heyday, during the Roman era. And then you go to some place like in the Mayans, especially for the Spaniards who had been at war back and forth for 400 plus years, and then they come across and then they look at the Mayans, and then you see literally that's floating. That was that's where Mexico City was they had the floating stuff full of gold and copper and everything else, and the streets were clean, and but I think it had like over 100,000 people, and that's like my biggest city has 30,000 people. That is amazing. And
Yeah.
nowadays, like my city, which I think nothing of, has there's two cities next to each other, has 100,000 people. I'm like, our tallest building is maybe 6 or 7 stories tall. I mean, it's kind of sad when you think about it that way. We just take stuff so much for granted, and like we talked about before, you have to make it bigger and grander because
Right.
that's what the people remember from way back in the day. Just like all these people talk about how great Paris is, and I went, really? I was not that impressed by Paris.
Even less so now.
Well, I went to Rome. I wasn't. Don't get me wrong. Rome had a lot of other stuff there, but it still felt kind of like a third world country when I went. In the 80s.
Even more so now.
Well, I'm not saying more so now. I'm just saying it felt like back then is the technology, like air conditioners, which I grew up with as a kid in the United States. I felt like in Germany there were no air conditioners, or very few air conditioners when we were there. I was like, God, it feels like we're in the 1950s. That was in the 90s. It's just and we good God, I'm sure that the Afghans, when they look at us, are like, you guys live in some foreign Martian world where air blows through with that's cold, and it's like, yeah, but they couldn't maintain it. That's the other part. What can you maintain? Even if you have the technology, can you maintain it? That's the other part. It's hey, if you have a working sewer system, which the Romans had, England didn't have a working sewer system until what? Maybe the 1800s.
Yeah, well, a lot of the stuff that was built in Africa in the colonial times, like railroads and highways and things like that, and like they're just crumbling, and they're not even maintaining it, let alone building new ones.
I mean, I wanted to go to Angkor Wat, and I didn't. But it was too far away when I was in Cambodia. But Cambodians, a lot of stuff was built by the Americans, and then everything else was built like in the last 10 years. So we're talking from 2000 forward.
Yeah.
But boy, you went outside Phnom Penh, and it felt like you were in a Vietnam War movie. I mean, it was.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want to do any more traveling until they come up with much faster airplanes or transporters, because I don't. I was watching this thing today. It showed China. It showed China, like what they want us to see, and then what they don't want us to see.
Well,
You know what I mean?
well,
And once you get out of the tourist area, you take a wrong turn. Next thing you know, you're in Seattle.
like I said, I thought it was very interesting. Again, if I was going to go to a different country, I want it to feel different. And the problem that I'm having now for modern,
Sure, but I want to see the good different, not the different smell, but looks like Skid Row.
well,
it's like the pyramids in Egypt. It's like everybody thinks, like the 1920s or whatever. You have this great, huge pyramid out in the middle of the desert, not a soul around for thousands of miles. No, because if you take that camera that you took the shot of the pyramids with and turn it around, you're going to see some guy trying to sell you souvenirs in front of a Burger King.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the thing is people don't realize just how close it is, and let's be fair. The 1920s, if we're going to be playing something in Egypt, is much cooler sounding than doing something in modern day. That said, is all of us want running water, which they didn't have, and all this other stuff that we take for granted. I mean, even if we went back 100 years, people look over like, you have running water and light that comes from your sky, and you can actually tell your lights to turn on and off by voice. What magic is this?
That's what there was the TV show Lois and Clark.
Yeah.
New Adventures of Superman. There was an episode where they were investigating something, and it took them to Smallville. And so he's like, okay, I'll visit. It's like we can stay with my folks. I'll visit with my folks. And there's this big, huge fair going on in town and all that. And Clark is telling his parents, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna need to send a fax back to the office for something. And his mom is like, oh, fax? And Lois goes on, oh yeah, see, it's a facsimile. Is what it is you can say. Oh, she goes, honey, no. Oh, I know what a fax machine is. It's like when your nearest neighbor is 10 miles down the road, a fax machine is a handy thing to have.
Yeah.
They had one sitting in their living room right there, So it's like, it's like the technology, like I was saying earlier, it's like the technology of then has caught up to now. So the people of now got to think of, what the technology of the future
of tomorrow.
Yeah. One funny thing is that fax machines are a lot older than you think.
I think they're from the 1800s, aren't they?
Like World War One, around that time, they would, at least the ones that in the form that we think of it, like using telephone lines, they would send like it was used by like newspapers and journalists, and they would.
Oh well, remember the little ticker tape that people used to like do on television and stuff? Like, what the hell's a ticker tape?
Oh yeah. Or like Gomez Adams.
It was for the stock market.
Yeah. But no, I laugh because those got phased out long before, but they still kept them in movies and TV shows.
Yeah.
That's something.
I haven't seen one of those. As a matter of fact, the only time I ever saw one of those was in like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. What the hell did you see one in?
I used to watch old movies, and then I did see a lot of them. Well, they used to have them.
I did too, but I can't remember a single movie ever seeing a stock ticker in a movie though.
It was just one of those things. Well, black and white movies would have them. And
yeah, I know.
Simpsons, Mr. Burns has one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm just laughing at it because.
Yeah, it's like I've seen them, but it's to pull out a specific movie title, I can't think of.
It's but they still use them in a lot of movies well after they stopped using them, just because it was familiar enough. And these are things that we get.
It's like when we see a crank up phone on somebody's general store wall, we still know what it is.
Yeah,
right.
Or see the phone symbol on a computer, modern device. It looks like a handset from a phone from the 80s or 70s. Even.
Yeah.
Well, what about phone
with
booths?
With the curly cute cord.
I mean, if you really want to talk about things, phone booths and talking on the phone over there. I was.
Yeah, we came across a phone booth by our local library. It's like the only one in like 100 miles. And everybody who walked by it, I was sitting there waiting for the library to open. Every person that walked by it, picked up the receiver and clicked the little thing to see if it was still working, knowing damn well there ain't no reason that would work still. They took those out. What was it in the early 2000?
I remember going over to call my parents because I used to get the phone cards.
And what suckers we were.
Yeah,
what did they tell us why they took them out? They took out all the pay phones because of the drug dealers using them.
I never heard that.
Bullshit.
I never heard that was the reason they took them out. That's just because they took them out because I still used them in like the local supermarket.
No. I grew up the whole time they were saying they're taking them out because the only people who were using them were drug dealers.
Oh, see,
which is utter horseshit, and we should be suing our government for not maintaining them. Because think of all the times now that their car breaks down and they've got no freaking phone.
Almost none, because almost everyone has a cell phone. I mean,
no, that's what I mean. And your battery's dead. You know what I mean?
Well, that's very rarely happens. Well, that's
your fault for not maintaining.
No. See that kind of mentality is what took away a public service.
It wasn't a public service.
It wasn't a public service. It was private. It was a private company.
Well,
it was costing the private company money.
It was open to the public. If you had a quarter, even if you didn't have a quarter, you could still make a collect call. Try making a collect call on your cell phone.
Okay, well, I don't. Yeah, but I have unlimited.
You don't need to make a collect call on your cell phone. You've already paid for it.
No.
I know, but I want to charge the other guy.
Wait,
I want to charge somebody.
It gets even better.
Come on.
Wait a minute, it gets even better.
Man.
Wait, Shadow. It gets even better. I have to walk. If I have to walk far enough to find a cell phone, I can find a charger before then. I mean,
You know the only
I
place
just
pay
picture
phones-
Shadow picking up
you
the
know
phone. Can I
only
get the
place
like
pay
a
phones still work-
like a modern razor phone, like a modern cell phone? Just asking for the operator.
Yes,
You guys
operator. I want to make a collect call.
You know the
to
only
one
place-
900 spank me.
Do you guys know the only place that exists? Because it still exists in modern society where you can make a collect call.
Prison.
jail, isn't it? Yeah.
Prison. That's
I
right.
mean,
How effed up is that?
Well, what gets me about it is that you're paying anyway for a certain amount. But no, I have to laugh at the whole thing, which is just the whole thing of, like I said, I used them, but they got phased out because no one was using them anymore. I mean, once the cell
That's
phones
not
became
true.
ubiquitous.
That's not true at all.
Oh, really?
It's not
I
that-
used to use them. I was like the only person using a phone calling my parents because cell phones
I
phased
can prove it.
everything
I can
out.
prove it to you. I can prove it to you. Why were they then? Why in my experience and where I live were they saying they're taking them out because only drug dealers are using them?
That's where you lived. I'm telling you where I lived, they just phased out because no one used them because they weren't economic. There was an economic thing where I lived. I never heard anyone ever use the drug dealer explanation for it.
I mean, I've heard people say it, but not an official statement
Yeah.
from the telephone company.
Yeah, neither have I.
But
for
I
that.
mean,
I remember there was like a
they
lot
were
of
phased out because it's not that nobody was using them, is that not enough people were using it
Right.
for the telephone company to make a profit off of them.
I mean, I used to see 4 of them, and I used to have like the AT&T card and stuff, and they would be on right outside the HEB, or they'd be on the inside of the HEB. But let's be honest, cell phone service when it was a flat rate, that's when I saw them all disappear. Is now you didn't have to pay for long distance. It was like, hey, pay $30 and you can
Yeah,
call
but
anywhere in
have
the
you
United
ever
States.
have you ever run out of like your battery dies on your cell phone and you ask somebody if you can use their cell phone and the answer is always no?
I'll say, well, usually I can, if I'm going to ask someone to call me, I'd say, do you mind calling this number for me? And let them call.
I've had to do it a couple of times, and every time they just say no.
Well, if you're a stranger,
Let
I
me
don't
look
want you
at
to touch
you
my
like
phone.
you're trying to pull some sort of fast one. You know what I mean?
Well, usually, I don't know. I haven't had any problems, but then again, I usually hang out with other people that are with me. But usually, even when my cell phone's about dead, I'm like, I can usually find some place to plug it in and charge it. You know, the only place that my phone has normally died is when I'm in an airport.
Yeah. See, the other thing is though, like if you go to like whenever we go to the fair, like the county fair here, as soon as you get to the fair and you pull out your phone, you can literally watch the battery just go.
I don't know. I haven't had the same problem you have. Most of the time, whenever mine does, it's because, most of the time when I do it, it's just because, I turn off a lot of crap. I turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. As soon as you do that,
Yeah, because whenever you get, if you're ever in a crowd of like a lot of people, they're all trying to use the same towers.
Yeah.
And what that does is that forces your phone to keep trying to maintain its connection, and it actually ends up using like a lot more power.
Well, you know what I do is I usually will, then I'll put it into
Sleep mode or something.
I'll put it in airplane mode, and then when I want to like send a message, then I'll turn it back on and just do that. But I haven't had this problem that I used to do. But to be fair on this, is I even use my phone, as much as we're talking about stuff, I even used my phone with the same carrier, AT&T, when I was in Iraq. And then I used it when I was in Hungary by paying $10 extra a month. I got unlimited text messages and stuff. So, and then when I was in Cambodia, we don't want to talk about this, and we're talking like the people didn't have running water or electricity. They still had cell phones.
I know,
which
right?
I thought was the funniest thing. Because it was like right around the store. Everyone had a cell phone with a card.
Well, yeah. I mean, what government isn't going to support, institutionalized tracking systems on all its citizens?
The government barely had functioning police. It didn't matter whether they were tracking you or not. My whole point is that it doesn't matter whether they're tracking you or not. The whole point is that they didn't have to support the infrastructure for it. You don't have to, because let's be honest, they were doing this in the 90s. with Echelon, they were already tapping the wire lines long before then.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, it's at this point, if, you know, again, for them, yeah, okay, the U.S. government was doing it. I'm telling you this much: the Cambodians were not that sophisticated, or even had the infrastructure for their government to do that. But everyone still had a cell phone because it was easier. Even when I was in Afghanistan, and what's funny is the Americans still allowed them to use it so they could track them. But
Mhm.
even in Afghanistan, no one was using the lines because it was easier to just use cell phones. You weren't limited to like the actual physical lines. This is why out in the countryside, more and more people using Starlink and stuff like this, like, you know, off-grid game. It makes it a lot easier. It's like, why do I have to have a fiber optic cable hooked up and spend thousands of dollars when I could pay $30 and just hook up to that thing that's 5 miles away? And
Jens, you're
that's
gonna have to
where,
hold the fort. I got to go use the restroom.
sure.
Yeah, there's
I
like
can
a lot of
find where the hell is the.
there's a lot of countries like they're kind of skipping
Yep.
the whole like telephone lines and stuff like that and going straight to like just towers to
Yeah.
connect
Well,
everybody.
and do you know how much cheaper it is to do that? I mean,
Oh, imagine, yeah. Or just
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
yeah.
there's no
Oh, go ahead.
there's no need to go to the landlines and things like that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that would be the equivalent of you know, us skipping the telegraph.
Yep.
You know, it's like we have better methods now,
Yeah.
more advanced.
Well, some of what they call with tech debt or things like that is, you know, the how much do things cost is by skipping these generations, they don't have to waste huge amounts of resources when they can move up very quickly to modern day. Like we said, is, you know, they didn't have to go through, what was it? What, you know, when were the phone lines mostly put in? Probably like 1930s and later. You know, it wasn't until the 50s most people probably had a phone.
Really?
And in the meantime, they're, you know, they went over from literally, you know, mud huts into within like 10 years, they have all these cell phones and everyone's using a cell phone now. And then it gets good enough that they can use the smartphone. So they skipped over, you know, the first one with the rotary phone and the, you know, with the what was it? With they used to have the operators that would hook you up, you know, with the little things. They skipped that group. They skipped the digital. So when we went past the rotary, then they went past the digital. They went past the bricks that were used to be cell phones, and they went right into smartphones, and now in text messaging. Okay.
Yeah, and the internet completely on your phone.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, you know, it was just like the other day, you know, it was like I was at the store and I was thinking how good I had it compared to the old timers. Because think back in the day, the guy gets a call from his wife. Hey, honey, on your way home from work, can you stop by the grocery store and pick up this and that? Oh, sure, honey. And he goes, and there's like 50 different brands, 30 different sizes, and 10 different flavors of this and that. Which one does he get? He doesn't know. He's got to guess. I remember seeing this one a lot. Maybe it's this one. And he grabs it, and only to get home to find out if he indeed got the right one.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I ain't got that problem now. Here's what I do: go to the store, this and that. Hey, hon, is this? No, that's not the one. Get the one in the blue box. Oh, this one? Yeah, that's the one. All right. I go home, knowing full damn well I got the right one. And if I got the wrong one, it's not my fault. It's hers because she told me it was the right one.
I'm gonna mention something else because, you know, drones are really coming out and stuff like that, and you know, talk about just technology overall. You know, we're starting to say, hey, I need to get this, and people are like, okay, I'll fly the drone over and get you aerials with GPS coordinates within, you know, a day. Whereas that used to take a whole surveyor and it'd take a week or more to do stuff. And then on top of that is even talking about just herbicides, and because we are always trying to get rid of, you know, trees and stuff. It's like, man, it's so much easier than putting a human being on a slope with rock that's dangerous, and they can now just fly a drone and they can just spray each individual tree, just beep beep beep, you know, just, and it's cheap. You know, they were talking about doing, I think it was an acre they could do, it was like in a minute they could spray it to get rid of the vegetation on it. I was like, cool. You know, is it perfect? No. But just the technologies that are there just make it so much easier. And
Well,
but the other part that comes into it is, and someone's talking about this, is your iPhone is generally only as good. Now I'm not including the other aspects to it, but a phone only works with cell towers. Your cell phone tower. If there are no cell phone towers, your phone is a brick.
Yeah.
And so you have to have those other technologies in there to make it worth having.
Yeah. I think satellite's gonna be the next thing. Remember they had like those it's not like there anymore. Those there was like a satellite company, and you could still see the satellites in the sky. God, I
It's
can't
like
remember.
Sirius XM or something like that.
Like it might have been like it was more. It was for Coles.
Oh, okay.
Iridium, maybe it was Iridium.
Mhm.
Yeah, they would have like, and you could like they were very bright satellites too, so you can spot them pretty easily.
And now you have Starlink, which hooks up people in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
and and you can get it just about anywhere in the world. What was that? Because I remember having satellite phones, and boy, those were super expensive. We burned through thousands of dollars of stuff because they said, "Hey, you're allowed to hook up." They didn't tell us how much it would cost, and they're like, "You guys spent way too much money surfing the internet on that." Oops. When they had the fires and then they had the hurricane, boy, all of a sudden you're hooked up. You don't have to worry about cell phone towers locally. If they lose power, you still have to get the generators and everything else out. And so, during a major disaster, well, now they have those satellite phones. Like, okay, everyone gets hooked up. You can call your family and let you know that you're okay. Yeah, it's just. That's all magic, effectively. I mean, that's at the point that we if they took we were all looking at flying cars, but none of us were thinking nearly as much as like the communicator from Star Trek, and that achieved much faster.
Well, we've had flying cars for a long time. They're called helicopters, but
I remember like in the 80s, like you take do like a long distance call, and literally you could barely hear the person.
I remember paying $1 or $2 a minute calling someone long distance, and now it's like, oh, okay, I'll call someone overseas.
Yeah, I remember like my family in Greece. They were like you would never. They were just it's a poorer country, so like rarely you would get a call from them. It was a little cheaper. It was because we're just more prosperous country here. We'd call them. Like if you got a call from them, somebody is dying.
right. Yeah, I had some friends overseas as well. Back in the was it 90s? And it would be hard to hear, which makes no sense at all. Because either the connection works or it doesn't.
It gets lost every time.
Not
necessarily.
There's a lot of interference. It depends on if they're bouncing off satellites or even the stuff under the phone connections. They were still analog, so they could still be messed. They still had issues with it.
Yeah,
and then you still have magnetic energy from
No. What I mean is the volume.
Oh, yeah.
It would be like you'd have to struggle to hear because the volume was literally like it was on the lowest volume.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That shouldn't be a thing with analog.
Well, no. If you look at AM and FM, a lot of it was determined by the peaks and valleys. Whenever we did electronics, a lot of that would determine it, unless you had an amplifier in somewhere in there to boost the signal.
Well, no. What I mean is the phone itself should have been able to, have like the equivalent of a volume switch.
No. Oh, I agree with I agree. The phone should have, but you're right. At the time, it was one sound. It's not like where I can up my phone now.
It didn't have a variable volume.
Yeah. No, I agree on that. And you're like, why didn't you have a volume on this? It wouldn't be that hard. But everything was analog.
Like the old saying goes, today's science fiction is tomorrow's science fact.
Yeah, that was
right. I was thinking about that. It's literally getting harder to come up with things that are science fiction-y. You know what I mean? It's like we probably already have all the crap except like space travel and transporters, right? We probably already have all the other crap. We just don't have access to it. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm going to say we're at the infancy stage. We have cybernetics, but the cybernetics are nothing like you'd find in Shadowrun or Cyberpunk.
Right.
No, but I mean, it's getting harder every day
Yeah.
to think of. I was thinking like what would I put in a world like in a sci-fi game that would seem like higher tech. You know what I mean? It's already there, or in like a modern day setting. Without going full comic book mode.
What's
You know?
like what is the next step, the next evolutionary step of this particular piece of technology?
Well, yeah, but you know what I find.
Yeah.
But what I find
I was thinking like new technologies. You
Well,
know what I mean?
well, there's no such thing as new technology. It's all
Well,
old
like force
technology.
field technology or anti grav. There's a few things that are still out of reach, but
Yeah.
there's not that many like there used to be.
I think it's a lot of it would be, right now it's like metamaterials, things like that.
Mhm.
We're still kind of fiddling with them. That looks like the progress, and then like the implications of what that would be. I think
But
like how
but-
reflective something is can be like a big changer.
well, I'm going to mention this much when you say nanomaterials. Yeah, but that's just you can hand wave stuff like that.
Yeah,
This is strong as diamond, which they did before. So
Yeah.
while it's new for us, the real big thing, of course, was communications and having, you remember the Dick Tracy watch? We literally have that now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The TV show Knight Rider.
Yes.
You had a guy who used his watch to talk to his car that could drive around and pick him up. In the 80s, nowadays, people are sending their kids to school without a driver. I mean, like a 9-year-old.
Yeah, well, I
it's like,
mean,
okay,
that's a
it's in the
horrible
car,
way
and
to
the
talk.
car drives.
What are you talking about? McGill has a name.
Huh?
Oh, you're not talking about Uber. Oh, sorry.
Well, no. But I'm laughing at the whole thing, which is, but no, you're right. For a lot of this is,
Racism is funny
but
stuff.
I get it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's some things I like listening to, but like I've been listening to Dune, and if you look at Dune, nothing in there would really be considered, other than the fact that the highlighters
Mhm.
would really be considered that far. It was funny because one guy said, "Well, there's space witches," and I said, if you actually read the book, most of that stuff can be done by human beings today if they're willing to spend all that time on the, personal control and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's interesting on, most of our stuff is probably in replacement parts for technology. And then that's the other part too, is 3D printing. I mean, if we get close enough, there's a certain point when like, how we always complain like gears break and then we have to throw something away. Well, now we can literally print the gear out. We can put it into the thing to fix it.
Yeah.
Now,
That's if the company doesn't build in to the machine, the device itself, things that prevent you from fixing it, which they do this very minute. If you crack open certain devices, you void the warranty, and there are mechanisms built into that device to make it break. When it hits a certain point on the clock.
I'm not saying that there isn't some planned obsolescence, but my whole point is we're now at the stage where you can start bypassing because what we've all seen this. When they
Some
talk
things
about
yes, some things no.
well, yeah. Well, not everything has to be. Not everything has to be. Most of the stuff that I find that breaks is usually the plastic. But
Right, but planned obsolescence should be illegal.
why?
Uh, well, every single environmental issue that the government tries to freaking bitch about, that's like a big one.
Well,
I mean,
no. There's a
landfills are
difference
filled
between-
with things that could have been repaired were it not for the company building it unrepairable.
Well, here's the other problem that I have with see that you're arguing right of repair versus obsolescence. They're two different things. But the other one that comes into it is and they are related somewhat. But what I'm also referring to the fact is like your coffee pot, which they bring over by the thousands, and you're like, hey, I broke my coffee pot, and they're like, it's cheaper to buy the whole thing than to buy the coffee pot individually.
Yep.
And you're just like, that doesn't make any sense. It makes sense if you're looking at volumes, but from an average person, it's like, why can't I just get a regular coffee pot? but my point being is a lot of
because it
times.
costs more to make the box to put it in and ship it than it costs to make the item.
Oh, I know, but what I'm referring to is a lot of items that I have that break. They're usually plastic gears, and that's what I need to go fix. And boy, you
It's
can
not the
see quickly.
gears; it's the cables or the pulleys or the
Oh yeah,
bands that
I
move
remember.
those things.
I remember
No,
fixing my
for me,
PCL
it's
like
been the
that.
gear. The gear itself will break, and then it has it'll spin, but it won't catch. And then I'm like, well, I could easily replace that pulley if I want to go into it. Um,
Mhm.
but the other hard part is trying to find parts. But again, my whole point being on this is now you can 3D print stuff. That's the one cool thing that we have, which was purely sci-fi, and we don't talk about that much. Um,
You know, 'cause mostly in our circles, if you're not printing up BattleTech miniatures, you don't need one.
Well, that's true. But what I'm saying is all I need is my one friend who has a 3D printer. If I can get him an STL file, I'm like, hey, can you print me off the gear thing? Oh, sure. You want the gear here? Um,
Yeah.
but again, you're right. The reason that we're getting 3D printers is not the reason that I'm saying that we could. But for an FDM printer, man, there's all sorts of stuff I could be building. I've got
Yeah.
all of these board games that I could. Like I see people like even things like when you have your drawers and you're putting in your silverware. Like, why would I buy something, dude, if I could just 3D print it?
Yeah.
The some of the things are like the materials aren't like to like print like a lot of the gears are made of Teflon and things like that or nylon. Nylon you probably could do it like kind of at home, get the special high temperature nozzles and stuff. But I think I think we're quite there. I think the point is now people you're starting to see people like reuse getting like plastic bottles and putting them into their 3D printer, or at least they're stripping them down and making them into like strips of
FDM coil.
into filament, so they can make it into
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
yeah.
But even if I hate saying this, if I can get a part and it's the proper size, even if the part lasts me 6 months, it just depends on how much I want to take it apart and put it back together.
Sure.
It's like, okay, most printers can do that stuff, nowadays. Now, the bigger problem is finding the STL file, but I think
Well, an ideal smart home would have the STL files of every component part of your house in
Yeah.
its memory banks.
Well, one cool thing is like car companies. They have like you make. Let's say you're gonna make like Omanel's cars or whatever, and you're gonna put it out there. There's like a lot of rules on like how long you need to maintain a supply of parts for that car. Like you can't like just go and make a car and then like the something breaks on it and then like, well, he went out of business 10 years ago and we don't make it anymore. There's like all this supply stuff. That could be like an interesting thing, like where like now you're starting to 3D print those things and it's not as much of a worry for like industrial companies.
And the sooner the scanner technology comes around, the easier it will be to, for the layman to take something and go, I need to make one of these. I don't know how to draw it, on CAD or what have you. I can just scan the item, and now the 3D printer knows what to freaking make.
I'm going to mention one thing which was kind of cool is my dentist. I had lost an overlay, and I lost it. He literally scanned my teeth, built me another overlay because of it, and put it back on, even though I had lost that part of the tooth. And he says, okay, we're going to fit it. And it used to take stuff like that like weeks. He literally did it in like an hour. And that was 10 years ago. And, so some of this stuff is getting really cool for what they have. But like everything else, is it going in a positive direction or a negative direction? And it seems like more and more people are trying to get into that subscription because when we talk about planned obsolescence, well, if I sell something that works all the time, then I don't have to buy another one, and then I don't do it. I've also asked
but the whole concept of planned obsolescence was based on a faulty premise, like they would run out of customers. That's dumb. If your product is sound, you'll always have customers because people are always, dying and making new customers.
Yeah, no. The problem is that once something's there, they don't have to make a new one. That's the whole thing. Is you're talking about this? That was really done for light bulbs. That's why they put in a thinner filament. It's when they're like, look, we want to be making a certain amount of money. It's not that they couldn't make the old incandescent light bulbs last longer. They just
Yeah, I
found that
mean,
they,
once upon a time, things were made with a lifetime warranty on purpose.
yeah.
You
But, but
buy
but
a
but the
hammer.
expectation is that you would die by the time you were 50. You that was,
Maybe, but I mean, I would really like to see, because like now I look for when I buy anything, I look for quality over anything else. How long is this projected to last? Not how cheap is it.
well, that's true. But I will say this much is, my bigger things are, do I want, like, my washer and dryer? My dryer's been having problems. I could go fix it. I just don't want to spend like the day or two messing with it.
It's almost impossible to do that now.
No, it's
Where we
not.
live, well, where
Well,
we
I
live,
mean,
there used to be places you could take things to have them repaired, or you could get the part. But now, every new washer or big appliance we bought in the last 25 years, its life expectancy has gotten shorter and shorter to the point we bought a washing machine a while back, and he said, "Okay, this will last you about 2 years." What do you mean it's brand new? Yeah, well, that's how long they last now.
well, the same thing with refrigerators. But again, my whole point is that you
That's
can usually
asinine.
you can fix it yourself. Um, I just choose,
What's
like,
up,
my
Janet?
my sensor is broken on mine, and it's been broken for a
Hey,
couple of
Janet.
years. But I've had my washer and dryer for 10 years. At
Yeah.
this point, it's like, if I want to take it apart, this is why I like having my son, because he loves to take things apart and fix them. Is if I hand it to him, he'll do it. It's the same thing of but to me, the right of repair, which has more to do with like the military stuff, the military is not even allowed to fix its own equipment. Otherwise,
Yeah.
they void the warranty. And my whole point is if the U.S. government is paying for whatever materials there, we should be keeping the factories, and we should be keeping everything else there. Like, we get the patents. Guess what? We have all the drawings and the patents. They're saved, and so we can try restarting it. But again, I understand planned obsolescence if they want to make money, but the same token is, I'm also trying not to buy a Speed Queen that'll cost me $2,000 for my washer and dryer.
Yeah.
If you want
One
a Speed Queen, that'll last 20 plus years.
one cool thing with
No,
like
no, they won't. That's
is
just it. Even the best on the market, they don't do that.
Speed Queens do, but
Really.
Speed Queens, well, here's the thing. What do they use Speed Queens for? Those are for laundromat. So the expectation is those are running for almost 24 hours a day for years on end. And with you, you're probably like, okay, something's going to rust if it's going to, before anything else fails in the Speed Queen. But you're also looking at something that's going to cost 4 or 5 times normal.
yeah.
But yeah,
Well, one cool thing with like nowadays is like you can just look up how to fix something.
Yep.
So that's kind of a big help.
Yeah, but finding the parts,
Mm.
that's the other that is the problem.
that's the
Uh,
3D printer like we
we
were
we
talking about.
had another appliance breakdown, and when the guy came to take a look at it, he says it's going to be cheaper to replace it.
Well, that's true. That
What?
happens on a lot of things. But
Well,
but
I
again,
mean, but the same
the
thing can
3D
be said
printer,
about
you can print
cars.
your own part. Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
It's like that's why chop shops are a thing, because the parts of the car by themselves are more expensive than the car as a whole. I mean, I still haven't figured it out, but
Yeah,
that's,
that makes that's
but it's true.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like
I'm just
there are certain
well,
parts of that car that cost more than the car itself,
well,
or
part
as
of it is
much.
we're talking about packaging and things. It reminds me when I worked at Dell, my friend was telling me on how much the components cost, which were almost nothing. But if I bought them individually, they're like, but they had like literally trucks full of the things. We're talking, at the time it was 3.5-inch floppy drives. You
Mhm.
know, they had a truck full of these things, and they just like, yeah, it cost them almost nothing. It cost them more to have the person put it in the machine than the part itself. But for you to package and have someone ship it, it jumps the price way up. There's that scale
Yeah.
aspect to it, and
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, but I again, how many? If I can 3D print, like I have a gear that's broken in my car, and we just hacked it. We basically said, But if I was going to go in there to fix it, I would, if I could, I just have someone 3D print me the gear, and that would help fix that part. It's not like you can't find parts individually. Most of the time, it's find the right size part or something that will fit.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
look at Cuba. All right.
yeah,
When we had the trade embargo, it's like they had a lot of American products, but it went to like the 1950s, and that was it.
yeah.
Because there's that trade embargo. So you see a car in Cuba from the 1950s. You open that hood, and it's gonna look horrible because they couldn't get the parts to fix it. They can't get a new car. They couldn't get parts to fix it, so they had to make do with what they could find. So like they got a plastic gas can to replace the actual
Yep.
gas tank in the car because that's what would hold the gas in, and the original gas tank got a hole in it or whatever. It's like it just looks
So it
like
becomes a pranking car, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Well,
exactly.
that's what we're
So
referring to.
because but
Nine
because
57.
but because of because of that trade, they had to be resourceful. Whereas we in America, it's like we don't have to be that resourceful.
The other part is that
if there's a serious problem with our car, it's like we go to get it fixed, and it's like, yeah, I can fix it, but honestly, it'd be cheaper to just buy a whole new damn car.
I'm going to mention the perfect one, which is a microwave.
Well, that was maybe true before COVID. Now, not so much.
Well, I'm going to say, even for microwaves, it's cheaper just to buy a new microwave than trying to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And
fixing Christmas lights.
Oh, well, yeah, Christmas lights are another one. A lot of stuff is cheaper, even for us. It's like, how much do I value my time? If it took
That's
me
a biggie. That's a biggie too.
if it took me 2 hours to fix my microwave, and I can go to Walmart and buy a microwave for $75, guess what? For me, that's worth it. It's like, here we go. That's what. I'm not disagreeing with the planned obsolescence. My bigger issue is the electronics, which are things I cannot replace or find component parts for, and you have to do certain things, and that's what usually happens. They have those boards that will fail. But I agree with you.
Or the parts are proprietary and you just can't get them.
And also, you have to consider nowadays everything is connected to the computer industry. Everything, your car, your TV,
The
refrigerator, ovens, everything. It's all
Who
connected.
the hell needs? Oh my God! Who needs their refrigerator hooked up to the damn internet?
See, what happens is like you have you're like have this much milk left. It's like, oh, I need to go get some milk. Oh no, here, bleep, scan it. Okay, boom, it's being delivered.
You can do that, but I kind of go like, I actually like to go shop.
Yeah, I don't want anybody.
That's
But
that's fine. But I'm just saying, it's like that's why you asked why would you have your refrigerator connected to the internet? That's why.
I don't want anybody knowing what's in my refrigerator.
They already know.
Have a 3D printer
No, they don't.
refrigerator.
They don't.
3D print food.
Well. No. Here's the scary part. I don't want them to realize how old some of the things are in my refrigerator. I'm afraid to know on how old some of those things are in my refrigerator. There were things in my refrigerator that I left in there because I was more afraid of cleaning them out and throwing them away than leaving them in the refrigerator.
You didn't want to create the Blob, from Steve McQueen.
Well, not just that, or some type of gas bomb, and seeing if we could survive getting
Some
out
sort
of the
biological agent that would kill innocent bystanders.
Oh yeah, I'm like, I don't want to hear like your milk has expired. Like, shut up. It's still good.
Dave, your milk is expired, Dave.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's certain things in there, and like the other part is that like he's talking about, a lot of stuff I have, like I don't. It's going to take me more effort to scan it in than it is just to realize, hey, I need to get certain amounts of food. Let me go to HEB and see what I want when I wander around and see what they have on sale.
But here's the thing, though. You go to HEB, you have to circle the parking lot 7 times to find a spot.
I don't know where the hell
What,
you
what are
are.
you
My
talking
HEB.
about?
I don't know where you're living.
Yeah,
What time are you shopping?
yeah, right,
Nerdy, when I
dude.
go in, I usually I have zero problems getting in there and getting out, unless it's during Thanksgiving or Christmas. That's about the only time I have any problems with HEB. No,
Yeah,
but yeah, for me, like
I
okay,
don't
I
know.
get
I guess I always hit at the busy time
what go at
because
7 a.m. Go at
yeah,
7 a.m. and on a Saturday.
yeah, yeah. Don't go after 12 before 5, Monday through Sunday.
Well, especially don't go like on a Sunday right before there's a big game or something when everyone's
Mhm.
forgetting, or Wednesday right before Thanksgiving, or that's those are those are all the days I'm like be careful. But no, I think I even went the day before Thanksgiving, and I still went in like at
Yeah,
7
I
a.m.
mean, this
Yeah,
year, I don't know if you guys heard, but like this year, Black Friday and pre-Thanksgiving, etc., were just absolute busts for the 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 uh, the big the big stores. They 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 did not get out of the red like they hoped.
well, part of it is the economy sucks.
Hmm.
Um, that's the big one I'm
Hey,
looking at.
I saw something today where like 95% of all the purchases made on Black Friday were on credit.
Well, I buy everything that's not on. I mean, I use a debit card, but here's what gets me about some of it is I don't think
Wait,
it's
you
extending.
clean your refrigerator, Janet? Wait,
I
you were
did.
supposed to do that?
I just had my son
Well,
clean the
I
refrigerator.
agree with you, Janet. That no, but
This
anyway, as I was saying though, is like you go to HEB, you circle the parking lot, trying to find a spot. Then you got to go in. You go in and you go
Well, I
to
mean,
the area,
are you
you
one of those?
grab your milk. Then what do? You go to the front and you look at that long ass line with the cashier, and then you look at that short itty bitty line with the self checkout. So what do? You go to the self checkout. You know what? You're scanning it. So just skip all that and scan it at your damn refrigerator. Have it
be,
delivered.
Okay,
because
let me ask a question there, nerdy. Um, are you one of those guys who insists on parking as close to the store as possible?
I don't insist on it. I mean, I start at the front and work my way back.
Okay.
Actually,
see,
I prefer to park closer to the cart corral.
yeah, that's what I do. But see, I don't know where you're shopping, nerdy, because if we go to the same HEBs, because I don't have that problem. But to be fair, is I usually like going in the early in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in Chicago, it sucked. That sucked because I had to get through traffic. it's that, but
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, look, when I go
Whenever I go to the
shopping,
grocery store, there's always parking, and even if it's not like right near, I have no problem parking. Where I'm going to have to walk another extra 100 or 200 feet to get to the store, because then I'm going to walk around the entirety of the store, um, which is a lesson I learned from my parents, who, mind you, they couldn't walk, and the handicap spaces were never available, and they always parked all the freaking as far away from the freaking building as possible, just to get a parking spot, because they didn't care, because they're gonna go all around the inside of the freaking store anyways, so another couple of 100 feet is really no big deal.
well, for me, a lot of times it doesn't bother me for stuff. It's um, to go in there because a lot of times I'm looking for certain things and I want to be able to select it, and I don't want them selecting stuff for me.
Yeah,
Uh,
I hate that. Anytime I have to have like stuff delivered like that, like from Walmart or something, it's I won't do fruit or vegetables or
No,
cuts of meat,
yeah.
because it will be crap, and ice cream will be melted, things like that. I just rather do it myself, and I shop once every 2 weeks, and that's it.
Well,
Get everything for 2 weeks.
I probably shop 3 times, 2 or 3 times a week. Like I go to the local
Oh,
butcher.
really?
I'll go to the local butcher and I grab like the boudin sausage in one, and then I'll go to HEB and grab some stuff. But I agree with you. There's a lot of the food that I want. I want fresh, and I want to see what's there. And then sometimes I'm willing to accept the ones that had 25% off, and I want to see what it looks like. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have the same problem, but to be fair, my son hates it if I try to go shopping immediately after work, because then that's the scary part. But most of the time, I like going in about 7 o'clock, and I talk to him, and I'm like, "Hey, I want to go in here. I like this cut of meat. I like this over here. I like, hey, do I need brie? Let me go check how old the croissants are."
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So
Come on in, Janet. You know where.
anyway, I need to get going. I did have fun talking about Atlantis, and now we're on
Me
to
too.
the
Me too.
planned obsolescence of. Really, isn't that where a dystopian future is, where everything becomes subscription and we can't get everything we want? I'm like, that's the real reason I want to like get off the planet. It's just get away from the subscription model. Other than my cell phone and my internet, I guess, and maybe a couple of TV services, I'm like, nope, done.
Yeah, once Stranger Things is over, I'm hoping we can cancel Netflix.
You know what you should be
never
doing?
What?
You know what you should be doing? You should be getting Netflix like once every 6 months, have it for a month, binge, and then cancel.
I don't even watch that much TV.
Well, no. But my point is that instead of having a monthly subscription, is you just get the 1 month twice a year. It's like, okay, we're done. That's what I mean. And then binge on whatever show you want to watch.
Yeah.
And it's okay, we're canceling this one.
Or do the whole where you get the free trials. I don't know if they have it for Netflix anymore, but you put it on like one of
Hey,
those.
Janet.
Hey, Janet.
Hi.
You look nice today. What are you all dressed up for?
I just did a music stream playing all the Eagles' greatest hits.
One of my like top 5 favorite bands.
1977, 78.
I just bought the complete box set, or the Columbia box set. Because it only goes up to what the hell was the Long Run, and then the other stuff, that kind of sucked anyways, is on another recording company.
Yeah, I was gonna see. I don't have it on now. I guess that's only on my thing. Because I had that little bird's head with the blue logo in the background for their greatest hits as my avatar. It was fun.
You should have told me. I'm huge
I made
Eagles
sure
fan.
I used all live, live band when they were playing and stuff, with as many of the different singers for the different songs as I could find live, so that I could see, because I'm worried about AI coming and people not learning how to play the guitar or drums or learn how to sing.
Jackie just picked up the trumpet this year. He's already playing piano. Yeah, I except for Bear, most and another friend, most AI music, I'm not interested. I don't. It's hard to get attached to that. There's no real people behind it. You know what I mean? I don't know about you guys, but when I grew up listening to musicians, looking at the inside liner notes and the album covers and stuff, you could kind of learn things about them. Oh hey, they drink Coca-Cola too, or stupid crap like that. You'd be able to pick up subtle clues about them through what they would put on their covers and their liner notes and things like that, versus AI, machine number 742 just pumped out this greatest hits album of band that never existed. Just how do you there's nobody there, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's just that I just don't want it to be everything to become a lost art, because no one knows how to play a real instrument anymore, or how to paint or sculpt or craft things with your hands, like crocheting, sewing, building birdhouses, things like that.
Yeah. My girls are learning the violin and the harp.
Good.
The harp.
Yeah, I don't know where
What were you thinking? You
She
couldn't
must,
pick a heavier instrument?
oh God, yeah. The harp teacher told us like if she gets into this for the rest of her life, she's going to be like have like a van, have to own a van or something because
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're big.
Yeah. You can literally get electronic pianos now that are a million times lighter. Just
Mhm.
yeah, it's what she wants. She's pretty good. She's been doing
it's a cool instrument,
Silent
don't
Night.
get me wrong, but it's an odd one. It's not a
Yeah,
choice.
Think about it. When we get to where in the United States of America, we only have one orchestra left, things like that. It to me is kind of sad.
Well,
I
you
hope
guys will
that.
all be dead by then. I'll still be around, but that's hundreds of years from now.
Well, I hope I'm alive, just as long as possible. But you never
I'm
know.
just not a big music buff. Like there's songs I like, but
Yeah, but just to think about what's the world going to be like when no one's left alive that can play a guitar
yeah.
or a keyboard or the drums.
Or God forbid the saxophone.
Any instrument. It's going to be sad.
It reminds me of that.
unless something happens that blasts us back to the Stone Age, I don't think that'll ever happen.
Well, I hope not.
Well, it'll be like this, nerdy. No one will be able to do it for a living.
Well,
Because
yeah, because it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars, like it costs to go see a Kid Rock live. Okay.
Yep.
I went to see him. Now, if I can go to a concert where the one person's sitting there pushing buttons and videos pop up and music plays, it might cost me $25. See, if that. Or you just press a button on your computer and watch it. You don't even have to go out of your house.
Well, not only that, but like the radio will be taken over by nothing but corporate AI created music. Then
You don't have to pay anyone anymore.
right, and you try to be a performing musician, and no one will care because no one will pay you because they could just pull up something that they had created and they now own the rights to forever.
Mhm.
Look,
And-
as long as we live in a world where Roseanne Barr can be a #1 hip hop artist, music will still be alive.
I thought she was awesome when I saw
She
that
was.
video.
She was,
So-
but she's
so
awesome
look.
at everything. To be fair, national treasure. At least I
Yeah.
think so.
I've been
But I remember when she was doing stand up back in the day. I mean, long time ago. I mean, she's been around for a good long time, and
Yeah.
she's had a rough career.
Tom Arnold. No, one thing like with the whole like AI and stuff like that, I've been watching. I think there's like a whole. I think it's AI is part of it, but it's like the whole like how things are so ugly, and like this. There was this video that's kind of gone viral lately where this guy like showed us like a Victorian sewer pump house, and it was all decorated with like Greek columns and painted beautifully and mosaics on the floor, and it was like literally a sewer, like an industrial building for like managing waste.
Well, people used to have a lot more pride in their work. Could you say?
Yeah, and he's talking about like how the old lampposts they had like carvings of birds on them and things like that, and now they're just these modern.
I watched a
great boxy
video
things.
last night where they had a piece of rice and they put it on the end of some little thing they could hold it, and then they took a drill, a teeny tiny tip on it, and they carved a Godzilla.
Oh, cool! I think I've seen something like that
on
with a
piece of
pencil.
rice. That takes a lot of talent, but how
Yeah.
do you make a living doing
It
that?
takes a lot of magnification too.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I have trouble painting minis. Just
yeah,
like
that's crazy.
the yeah. I think there's going to be some kind of movement.
And if you lose it,
yeah,
well, I mean,
well,
you-
I hate it.
put it in a little case or something. I'm sure.
Put it inside a
Like
little
you do a
mustache
shark's
down.
tooth.
Hmm.
How old is a shark's tooth when you find it? Especially if you find a fossilized one.
Well, I just ripped it out of his freaking mouth, so not very old.
Well, no, there's fossilized ones. Some girl found one on the a beach somewhere, and it was a fossilized megalodon tooth.
Oh, cool.
So
That's what
it
they
was
told
like
her.
it was
It was a
really
real
old
megalodon,
and
right?
worth a lot of money. So it
It's
just
pretty.
what I'm saying is you just don't know what you could find still if you're looking for it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can dig for diamonds right here in the Crater of Diamonds in Arkansas. People are still pulling diamonds out, big ones, all different sizes. So,
Really?
and it's a park. It's a state park. You pay to go into the park, and you and your kids and everybody can just dig it till you find something, and come back day after day and keep digging.
That's what there's something like that in Pigeon Forge. Um, um, they have a software. They give you a little tray. You sit there and you can basically mine for, and whatever
Pan
you
for
find,
gold.
you get to keep.
I've got a buddy who still pans for gold, uh, but that's crazy.
There's people that still do that out here in Colorado. There's also there's a lot of I kind of went down the rabbit hole of like crystal videos and stuff where people are mining crystal. This guy's going around the country like to different places. I think he even went to the one in Arkansas, and like there's all different kind of crystals you can get in different places.
Yeah.
And some places like you go, you pay a little fee and you just dig for yourself, or other places you have a claim and you're like he was in one video, was like on his friend's claim up in Colorado, like, getting smoky quartz and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've actually got a riverbed by where Jackie went to elementary school, and we used to find all kinds of cool rocks, crystals and things like that. And since he stopped going to that school, went to the new high school, and they kind of blocked it off. You can't go there anymore because they built some
Yeah.
apartments or some crap. So we no longer get to do that. It's like almost impossible to get to it now.
Not too far from me, there's a place where people used to find dinosaur fossils, but they've kind of closed that road off. Called Dinosaur Ridge.
Well, I just wanted to stop in and say hi to everybody because I hadn't seen Nerdy Oregon in a few weeks because we haven't been able to play our game. And who knows what
Well,
we'll do
I
with
missed
this.
the last one, and then this one was canceled.
I missed one because of the wedding I went to, and then the other one we just did because he didn't want to do one, thinking nobody would be there because of Thanksgiving. So it was 2 weeks. So, and I don't know what's going to happen this Saturday.
Y'all ready for the holidays?
No.
Yeah.
Still got some buying to do.
Yeah. I haven't even started.
So,
Not even.
but I'm going to try to go get me something to eat.
Take care, Janet. You're always welcome here.
I just wanted to say hi to everybody and hung out a little bit. So you guys have a great evening, and hopefully I'll see you later. Yeah, tomorrow night I'm going to interview Ruben.
Who's Ruben?
Christopher Haynes, about just his life and his weight loss and everything he's been working on. You don't know Ruben?
No, I don't think
he's on the Friday Night Shit Show every so often.
Okay, I don't think
the one with glasses.
I've watched your show, so.
So him. I'm going to have him on tomorrow night for my show and just interview him because it's been miraculous because he was in a wheelchair and then he went to the Geeks and Gamers and Nerdrotic and all them went. I guess it was to Vegas. The fellowship thing, and he was out of his wheelchair walking around. Everybody was like, "What the?" For years, seeing him. So yeah, I'm excited.
That's awesome.
But maybe you can click tomorrow and see him. But I'm gonna ask him what kind of stuff that is. Just interview him like he's famous or something. See how it goes.
That's cool. That's nice.
But you guys have a wonderful night, and I'll see you later.
Right. Absolutely.
See you later.
Bye.
Nerdy, I will see you tomorrow night, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
because we're
Yeah.
playing Dead Rain tomorrow
Yeah,
with the
Dead
guys.
Rain.
Cool. So
Alright.
I'm gonna actually shut it down.
Yeah.
I've been doing this
It's
for
3
3
hours.
hours now. It was good having you guys. We'll do something. I don't know if I'm gonna do Wednesdays a regular thing because I'm trying to keep it open for a game night, but we'll see.
Yeah, keep it as a filler until you get a game going.
Yeah, because it looks like Monday's going to be my Monday, or alternating Thursdays will be my Barrels and Borderlands game, and I got to have like one night where I don't do anything because right now plate's pretty full. So thanks for showing up, guys.
All right.
Talking
Thanks for having
some
me.
weird crap, but you're always welcome. George, again, thank you for everything that you do, man. Everybody else out there in TV land, I will see you guys in the morning. Have a great rest of your week and Merry Christmas.
What? Hi.